Daniel Brooks stood in the Lakeside Cafe parking lot, keys in hand, telling himself for the 10th time that he could still leave. Inside, a woman he'd never met was waiting. Another setup, another disaster in the making. He'd survived 18 months as a single father. He'd rebuilt carburetors and transmissions with his bare hands. But walking through that door to meet a stranger? That terrified him more than anything else in his life. He didn't know that in 2 hours, everything he believed about second chances would shatter. He didn't know that the woman inside would see past every wall he'd built. And he had no idea that falling in love again would become the hardest, most important thing he'd ever done. If you want to know how a man who'd given up on love found it in the most unexpected place, stay with me until the end. And hey, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, and let's begin. The parking lot gravel crunched under Daniel's work boots as he stood beside his truck, staring at the cafe entrance like it might bite him. The evening sun cast long shadows across the small lakeside building, turning the windows into mirrors that reflected nothing but his own hesitation. "This is stupid," he muttered, pulling his phone from his jacket pocket. His thumb hovered over Marcus's contact. One call, one excuse about his son being sick, and he could be back home in 20 minutes. Safe, predictable, alone. But Marcus had used the word please 3 times in yesterday's text. So had Steve. And when 2 grown men who normally communicated in grunts and sports scores started begging, it meant they genuinely cared. Or they'd completely lost their minds. Daniel shoved the phone back in his pocket and forced his feet toward the entrance. The cafe was smaller than he'd expected. Maybe 10 tables scattered across a warm, wood-paneled room that smelled like coffee and something cinnamon. Soft jazz played from speakers he couldn't see. Through the far windows, the lake stretched out like hammered copper in the fading light. And there, at a corner table with a clear view of both the door and the water, sat a woman who looked up the moment he entered. Their eyes met. Daniel's first thought was that Marcus had undersold her. His second thought was that he should have worn something nicer than his cleanest pair of jeans and a button-down that still had a crease from the package. His third thought evaporated entirely when she smiled, not the nervous practice smile of someone on a blind date, but something genuine that reached her eyes. "Daniel?" She stood, and he noticed she was tall, maybe 5'8", with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans, too, and a soft gray sweater that looked comfortable rather than calculated. "I'm Emily." "Yeah, hi." He crossed the space between them, suddenly hyper-aware of the motor oil he could never quite scrub from under his fingernails. "Sorry if I'm late. I wasn't sure about parking." "You're right on time." She gestured to the chair across from her. "I got here early. Nervous habit." That admission, small, honest, loosened something in his chest. He sat down, hanging his jacket on the chair back. "You're nervous?" "Terrified." Emily laughed, and the sound was lighter than her speaking voice. "Blind dates aren't exactly my comfort zone. My sister set this up, and she can be persistent." "Sounds like you know my friends Marcus and Steve." "The dynamic duo of matchmaking? They think because they both got married this year, they're relationship experts." Daniel accepted a menu from the server who'd appeared beside their table. "Thanks. Just coffee for me. Black." "Same," Emily said, then caught herself. "Actually, do you have any of that cinnamon blend? I smelled it coming in." "We do. I'll bring a pot." The server, a kid who couldn't be older than 20, grinned like he was in on some secret. "Y'all take your time." When he left, Emily met Daniel's gaze with raised eyebrows. "Do we look that obvious?" "Small-town cafe on a Friday night? We probably have a spotlight on us." But Daniel found himself smiling despite the attention. "So, your sister. Is she going to interrogate me later, or does she trust your judgment?" "Oh, she'll definitely interrogate you. Claire doesn't do anything halfway." Emily folded her hands on the table, and Daniel noticed she wasn't wearing any rings, no jewelry at all except small silver earrings. "But she means well. After my divorce, she decided I needed to get back out there, which apparently means ambushing me with setups every few months." The word divorce sat between them for a moment. Daniel appreciated that she'd said it plainly, without drama or deflection. "How long?" he asked. 2 years finalized, 3 since we separated. Emily's expression stayed steady. You? Never married, but my son's mother left when he was 6 months old. That was 4 years ago. Something shifted in Emily's face. Not pity, which Daniel had learned to hate, but recognition. Like she understood the particular weight of that statement. So you're raising him alone, she said. Yeah, just me and Jake. He's 4 now. Obsessed with trucks, dinosaurs, and asking why about everything. Sounds exhausting. It is. Daniel leaned back as the server returned with their coffee. The cinnamon scent was stronger now, sweet and warm. But it's also the best thing I've ever done, even on the days when I have no idea what I'm doing. Emily wrapped both hands around her mug, steam rising between them. That's honest. I figured we might as well start there. Most first dates are just people lying about how great their lives are. And yours isn't great? My life is covered in motor oil, Legos, and scheduled around preschool pickup times. I work 60 hours a week at an auto shop because I own it, which means I can't just call in sick when Jake's up all night with a fever. I haven't been on a date in over a year because by the time I get him to bed, I barely have energy to shower. Daniel met her eyes. But Marcus and Steve wouldn't shut up about this, so here I am, probably talking way too much. Emily's smile returned, softer this time. You're not. And for what it's worth, I teach high school English, which means I spend my days with teenagers who think Shakespeare is torture. I live in a rental house I can't afford to buy. And my idea of a wild Friday night used to be grading essays with wine until my sister started forcing me into social situations. Used to be? Still is, honestly. But I'm trying to convince myself that's sad. Daniel laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising him. Is it working? Not really. I like my essays and wine. They fell into conversation then, the kind that skipped past small talk into something more substantial. Emily asked about the auto shop, and Daniel found himself describing the satisfaction of diagnosing a problem nobody else could solve, the puzzle of making something broken work again. She listened like she actually cared, asking follow-up questions that proved she was paying attention. When he turned the questions back to her, Emily talked about teaching, not the easy parts, but the hard ones. The students who came from difficult homes, the ones who couldn't read at grade level but were too embarrassed to ask for help. The small victories that made the frustrating days worthwhile. There's this kid in my junior class, she said, her coffee long gone cold. Jordan. Smart as hell, but his family moves around a lot. Foster system. He missed the first month of school, and he was so far behind I didn't think he'd catch up. Did he? He wrote the best essay on Hamlet I've seen in 5 years. Turned it in last week. Emily's whole face lit up. He compared Hamlet's indecision to being stuck between foster homes, never sure which one was real or permanent. It was heartbreaking and brilliant. Daniel watched her talk, noticing how her hands moved when she got excited, how her voice changed when she cared about something. This wasn't performance. This was real. You really love it, he said. I do, even when it's hard. Maybe especially then. Emily caught herself, laughing slightly. Sorry, I could talk about my students for hours. Don't apologize. It's nice hearing someone talk about work like it matters. Doesn't yours? Yeah, but fixing cars isn't exactly changing lives. Isn't it? Emily tilted her head. You said you own the shop. That means people depend on you. And I'm guessing you've helped plenty of people who couldn't afford to go somewhere else. Daniel thought about Mrs. Chen, whose ancient sedan he'd kept running for 2 years past its expiration date because she needed it for her nursing shifts. About the kid who'd come in last month with a broken taillight and no money. Daniel had fixed it for free because a traffic stop could have turned into something worse. Maybe, he admitted. Definitely. Emily's tone was firm. The world needs people who fix things, who show up and do the work nobody else wants to do. The server returned, asking if they wanted food. Daniel glanced at his watch and was shocked to see 2 hours had passed. 2 hours that had felt like 20 minutes. I should probably eat something, Emily said, scanning the menu. Otherwise, I'll regret this coffee. They ordered sandwiches and kept talking. Emily told him about growing up in a small town 3 hours north, about her sister Claire who'd become a nurse and appointed herself the family problem solver. About her parents, who were still married after 35 years and didn't quite understand how Emily's marriage had fallen apart. They don't blame me, she clarified. But they also don't get it. They got married at 22 and made it work, so why couldn't I? That's not how it works, Daniel said. No, it's not. Emily pushed her sandwich around her plate. My ex, he wasn't a bad person. We just wanted different things. He wanted kids right away, a house in the suburbs, the whole traditional setup. I wanted to finish my master's degree, establish my career. We thought we could compromise, but some things you can't split down the middle. Kids is a big one. Yeah. And the longer we tried to force it, the more resentful we both became. By the time we separated, we barely recognized each other. She looked up. What about Jake's mother, if that's not too personal? Daniel considered deflecting. It usually was too personal. But something about this conversation, this woman, made him want to be honest. Rachel was never ready to be a mother. I don't think she meant to get pregnant, and I definitely don't think she meant to stay. He stared at his empty coffee cup. When Jake was born, I thought maybe it would change things, that she'd connect with him and want to stay. But she was miserable. Postpartum depression, maybe, though she wouldn't get help. She just disappeared one day, left a note saying she couldn't do it. That must have been terrifying. It was. I had a 6-month-old baby and no idea what I was doing. My mom helped for the first few months, but she's got her own health issues now, so I figured it out. Trial by fire. Emily reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. You didn't just figure it out. You kept going. You built a life for him. I did what any parent would do. No, you did what every parent should do. There's a difference. Her hand moved the last inch, fingers brushing his knuckles. The contact was light, barely there, but Daniel felt it like electricity. He didn't pull away. They talked until the cafe staff started cleaning tables around them, until the jazz had stopped and been replaced by the sound of chairs being stacked. The lake outside was completely dark now, just scattered lights from houses on the opposite shore. I think we're being kicked out, Emily said, glancing around at the empty room. Daniel checked his watch again. 10:30. He'd told the babysitter, his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, that he'd be home by 10. I should have been back an hour ago. Oh no, your son. He's fine. Mrs. Rodriguez loves him, and she'll just add it to my tab of favors owed. Daniel stood, pulling cash from his wallet. But I should get going. They split the bill despite Daniel's half-hearted protest, then walked out into the cool October air. The parking lot was nearly empty now, just Daniel's truck and Emily's small sedan under the lone streetlight. So, Emily said, stopping beside her car, this wasn't terrible. That's high praise. I'm serious. I was expecting awkward silence and forced conversation. Instead, I stayed 3 hours and didn't want to leave. Daniel's heart did something complicated in his chest. Yeah, same. Would you want to do this again? Maybe somewhere that doesn't close at 10:30? The question hung between them, and Daniel knew his answer should be no. His life was already complicated enough. Adding someone new, letting someone in, it was asking for trouble, for heartbreak, for all the things he'd been carefully avoiding. But Emily was looking at him with hope in her eyes, and Daniel realized he was tired of being careful. Yeah, he said, I'd like that. Her smile could have lit the whole parking lot. Good. Give me your phone. He handed it over, watching as she added her contact information. When she gave it back, he saw she'd listed herself as Emily, coffee, date, with a small smiley face. Text me, she said, opening her car door. We'll figure out when. I will. She paused halfway into the driver's seat. Daniel? Thanks for showing up tonight. I know your friends pushed you into this, but I'm really glad they did. Me too. He watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing around the curve of the lake road. Then he climbed into his truck and just sat there for a moment, engine running, trying to process what had just happened. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Well? Daniel typed back, made it through without embarrassing myself. Thanks for pushing. 3 dots appeared immediately. Does that mean there's a second date? Maybe. Don't get ahead of yourself. Too late. Steve already told his wife. She's planning your wedding. Daniel laughed, setting his phone aside. The drive home took 15 minutes, and he spent most of it replaying the conversation, Emily's laugh, the way she'd reached for his hand. Mrs. Rodriguez was watching a telenovela when he came through the door, the volume turned low. She looked up with a knowing smile. "Good night?" she asked in her lightly accented English. "Yeah, really good." Daniel pulled out his wallet. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. Jake was an angel. Asleep by 8. She waved away his money, standing with the slowness of her 72 years. "But you come fix my garbage disposal tomorrow, yes? It's making that noise again." "I'll be there in the morning." "Good boy." She patted his arm. "You look happy. It's nice." After she left, Daniel checked on Jake, who was sprawled across his race car bed with stuffed animals scattered around him like casualties. His dark hair, the same shade as Daniel's, stuck up in all directions, and he was snoring softly, one hand clutching a plastic brachiosaurus. Daniel straightened the blanket, moved the dinosaur to a safer position, and just watched his son sleep for a moment. This was everything. This small person who trusted him completely, who called him daddy and believed Daniel could fix anything. The thought of introducing someone new into this life was terrifying. What if it didn't work out? What if Jake got attached and then Emily left? What if Daniel was setting them both up for heartbreak? But then he remembered Emily's hand almost touching his, her genuine interest in his life, his work, his kid, the way she'd talked about her students with the same fierce love Daniel felt for Jake. Maybe, just maybe, this could be something good. He pulled out his phone and opened Emily's contact. "Thanks for tonight. I haven't talked that much in years." Her response came within seconds. "Same here. I'm already looking forward to the next one. How's next Friday?" "Perfect. But fair warning, if we're meeting again, I need to know your opinion on pineapple pizza. This could be a deal breaker." Daniel grinned at his phone like a teenager. "Strong pro-pineapple stance. If that's a problem, we should probably call this off now." "Oh, thank God." "My sister said I couldn't trust you if you were anti-pineapple. You passed the test." "There are tests now." "Multiple tests, very rigorous. You're doing well so far." They texted back and forth for another 20 minutes, stupid jokes and easy banter that felt natural rather than forced. Finally, Emily sent, "I should sleep. Early class tomorrow." But this was nice. "Good night, Daniel." "Good night, Emily." Daniel set his phone on the nightstand and lay back on his bed, still fully dressed, staring at the ceiling. The smart part of his brain, the part that had been in survival mode for 4 years, was throwing up warning signals. Don't get attached. Don't let Jake meet her yet. Don't assume this will last. But another part, quieter but stronger, was saying something different. What if it does? He fell asleep thinking about coffee and cinnamon, about a woman who'd listened to him talk about carburetors like they were fascinating, about the possibility that maybe his life could be more than just getting through each day. The next week moved slowly and quickly at the same time. Work filled his days, a transmission rebuild on a '68 Mustang, routine maintenance on half the town's vehicles, and an emergency late-night call when the mayor's wife's car died on the highway. Jake started a new dinosaur phase, insisting on wearing his T-Rex costume to preschool 3 days in a row. And through it all, Daniel texted with Emily. Not constantly, they both had lives, responsibilities, but regularly enough that he started looking forward to the little buzz of his phone. She sent him a photo of a student's essay about why pizza should be considered a vegetable. He sent her a picture of Jake covered in mud after helping in Mrs. Rodriguez's garden. They talked about their days, shared small frustrations and smaller victories, and made plans for Friday. On Thursday night, Daniel was closing up the shop when Marcus showed up with Steve, both carrying six-packs. "Oh no," Daniel said, wiping his hands on a rag. "What are you two planning?" "Pre-date debrief," Steve announced, setting the beer on Daniel's workbench. "We need to make sure you don't screw this up." "I went on one date. You're acting like I proposed." "One successful date," Marcus corrected, popping open a bottle. Emily texted her sister. Her sister texted my wife. "The whole town knows you two hit it off." Daniel accepted the beer Marcus offered him. "This is what I get for living somewhere everyone knows everyone else's business." "Yep. So what's the plan for tomorrow?" "Dinner. That Italian place on Main Street." Daniel had made the reservation 3 days ago, then worried he was being too formal, then worried he wasn't being formal enough. Dating after years of not dating was like learning a foreign language he'd only half known in the first place. Good choice. Romantic but not over the top. Steve nodded approvingly. You gonna tell her about Jake being home with the sitter, or are you keeping that quiet? Why would I keep it quiet? She knows I have a son. Yeah, but there's a difference between knowing intellectually and knowing you're on a clock because your kid's at home. Daniel took a long drink. She has a job. She gets having responsibilities. True. Marcus leaned against the workbench, his expression turning more serious. Look, man, we're giving you shit, but we're also really happy for you. You've been in survival mode for so long, and Emily seems great. Just don't overthink it. Let yourself enjoy this. I'm trying. Are you? Steve asked. Because I know you, Danny. You're already planning for how it might go wrong instead of how it might go right. Daniel wanted to argue, but Steve wasn't wrong. Half his brain was already catastrophizing, imagining Emily deciding this was too complicated, Jake getting hurt, himself falling for someone who'd eventually leave. Old habits, he muttered. New chances, Marcus countered. That's allowed, you know, being happy, trying again. They stayed for another hour, the conversation drifting to easier topics, sports, work, Steve's upcoming anniversary trip. By the time they left, Daniel felt steadier. Less like he was about to jump off a cliff and more like he was simply taking a step forward. Friday arrived with rain, the kind of steady autumn downpour that made everything gray and slick. Daniel spent the afternoon reorganizing his closet, trying to find something date-appropriate that wasn't covered in oil stains. He settled on dark jeans and a blue button-down that Jake's teacher had once said brought out his eyes, a comment he'd been too flustered to respond to properly, but had filed away for future reference. Jake was fascinated by the preparation process. "Why are you so clean?" he asked, watching Daniel shave with the intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. "I'm going out tonight, remember? Mrs. Rodriguez is going to make you dinner." "Where are you going?" "To dinner with a friend." "What friend?" Daniel met his son's eyes in the mirror. At 4, Jake was smart enough to know when adults were being evasive. "Her name is Emily. I met her last week." "Is she nice?" "Yeah, buddy, she's very nice." "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know yet. I can ask her." Jake considered this gravely. "Okay, if she doesn't like dinosaurs, you should tell her they're cool." "I'll do that." By the time Mrs. Rodriguez arrived at 6, Daniel was as ready as he was going to get. He kissed Jake goodbye, promised to be home by 10, and drove through the rain toward Main Street. The Italian restaurant was warm and crowded, Friday night energy filling the space with conversation and the smell of garlic and fresh bread. Emily was waiting at the bar, and when she turned to greet him, Daniel's breath caught. She wore a dark green dress, simple but elegant, her hair down around her shoulders instead of pulled back. She looked beautiful and slightly nervous, which somehow made her more beautiful. "Hi," she said, and he caught the same uncertainty he felt reflected in her eyes. "Hi. You look amazing." "Thanks. You clean up pretty well yourself." She gestured to the crowded dining room. "I think our table's almost ready. Want to wait at the bar?" They ordered wine and found 2 seats near the end, close enough that their shoulders brushed. The bartender, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, smiled at them like she knew exactly what this was. "First date here?" she asked, setting down their glasses. "Second date, actually," Emily said before Daniel could answer. "But first time here." "Well, the chicken marsala is divine and the tiramisu is dangerous. Fair warning." She winked and moved on to other customers. Daniel raised his glass. "To second dates." Emily clinked hers against his. "To actually getting here through all this rain." The wine was good. Not that Daniel was an expert, but it tasted expensive and made him feel slightly sophisticated. They talked easily, picking up conversations from their texts, filling in details about their weeks. "So did Jake survive in the T-Rex costume?" Emily asked. "Barely. His teacher finally convinced him that T-Rexes need to take baths too. Smart teacher. She's a saint. I don't know how she manages 24-year-olds without losing her mind." Emily laughed. Different skill set than high schoolers, but same level of chaos, just with more snacks and nap time. Their table was called, and they moved to a quiet corner booth with a candle flickering between them. The menu was extensive, and Daniel found himself genuinely interested in the food, rather than just picking something safe. The bartender wasn't kidding about the chicken marsala, Emily said, studying the descriptions, but the seafood linguine sounds incredible. They ordered chicken marsala for him, linguine for her, and a shared appetizer of bruschetta that arrived smelling like summer. Between bites, they talked about everything and nothing. Emily told him about Jordan's latest essay. Daniel described the Mustang rebuild, how satisfying it was to bring something broken back to life. "You keep saying that," Emily observed. "Fixing things, making them work again. That's the job." "I think it's more than that." She set down her fork, meeting his eyes. "You like the challenge, the puzzle of it." "Maybe. There's something clean about mechanical problems. You diagnose the issue, replace the broken part, and it works. People are messier." "Everything is messier," Emily agreed, "but that doesn't make it less worthwhile." The conversation deepened as the meal progressed. Emily talked about her divorce with more detail than she had the first night, not dwelling on it, but acknowledging how it had changed her understanding of relationships, commitment, what she wanted from life. "I thought marriage was supposed to be easy if you found the right person," she said. "Like in movies where love conquers all and you just know. But real life isn't like that. Love isn't enough if you're not growing in the same direction." "So what is enough?" Daniel asked. "I don't know yet, but I think it starts with honesty, with seeing someone clearly and letting them see you the same way. No pretending, no performing." She paused. "That's what I liked about our first date. You didn't try to impress me with some perfect version of yourself. You just were." "I was tired," Daniel admitted. "Too tired to pretend. I figured if you were going to run, better to get it over with early." "I'm not running." The words hung between them, weighted with promise and vulnerability. Daniel felt that same electricity from the first night, that sense of standing on the edge of something significant. "Me neither," he said. They split the tiramisu, which was, as promised, dangerous, and lingered over coffee until the restaurant began to empty. When the check came, they argued good-naturedly about splitting it before Emily finally conceded to letting him pay. "Only because you got here first," she said. "Next time is on me." "Next time?" "Don't act surprised. You know there's going to be a next time." Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the street slick and shining under the streetlights. Emily's car was parked a block away, and they walked slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. "Can I ask you something?" Emily said as they reached her sedan. "Anything." "Are you scared of this?" She gestured between them. "Because I am. Terrified, actually, but I also don't want to let that stop me." Daniel leaned against her car, studying her face in the dim light. "Yeah, I'm scared. I've spent 4 years keeping my life small and controlled because that felt safe. Letting someone in means giving up that control, risking Jake getting hurt, risking myself getting hurt. I wouldn't hurt him. Or you. Not on purpose. I know, but things happen. People leave. I learned that the hard way." Emily stepped closer, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something light and floral. "I left my marriage because it was broken and couldn't be fixed. Not because I don't believe in staying, in trying. I'm not Rachel, Daniel. I'm not going to disappear." "I know that too." And he did, somewhere deep down. Emily was nothing like Rachel. She was steady, present, real in ways that made him want to trust again. "I'm just not great at this. At dating, at opening up, at any of it." "You're doing fine." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Better than fine. And we don't have to figure everything out tonight. We can just keep showing up, keep being honest, see where it goes." "That sounds almost reasonable." "I'm full of reasonable ideas." She squeezed his hand. "Text me when you get home?" "Always." She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and soft. Then she was in her car, waving through the window, leaving him standing on the sidewalk with his heart racing and his mind spinning. He texted her before he even started his truck. "Thank you for tonight, for understanding, for not running." Her response came as he pulled onto his street. "Thank you for letting me in, even just a little." That took courage. Or stupidity. Haven't decided which yet. Definitely courage. See you soon, Daniel. Inside, Mrs. Rodriguez reported that Jake had eaten all his dinner, taken his bath without complaint, and fallen asleep by 8:30. Daniel paid her double her usual rate, which she protested until he insisted, and then stood in Jake's doorway again, watching his son sleep. This was his world, this small person, this quiet house, this carefully constructed life. But maybe, just maybe, there was room for more. He climbed into bed with his phone, finding a text from Marcus. "How'd it go? Really good. Going to see her again. Proud of you, man. Keep going." Daniel set his phone aside and closed his eyes, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Hopeful. Genuinely, terrifyingly hopeful that this might actually work. That he might get to keep this feeling, this lightness, this possibility for more than just 2 nights. Sleep came easier than expected, and he dreamed of coffee shops and rain-slicked streets, of green dresses and gentle hands, of second chances that might actually become thirds and fourths and more. The world outside kept turning. His responsibilities remained. But for the first time since Rachel had left, Daniel Brooks allowed himself to believe that being a single father didn't mean being alone forever. And in the morning, when Jake asked if Emily liked dinosaurs, Daniel smiled and said he'd make sure to find out. The third date happened on a Wednesday afternoon, which wasn't typical for dating but worked perfectly for their complicated schedules. Emily had a half day for teacher planning, and Daniel had rearranged his appointments to take Jake to a dental checkup. They met at the park, between the dentist's office and the elementary school, and Daniel brought his son along because the babysitter had canceled, and he refused to reschedule with Emily again. "I hope this is okay," Daniel said as they approached the playground where Emily waited on a bench. "I know meeting the kid is usually a bigger deal, but—" "It's fine," Emily interrupted, standing as Jake bounded ahead toward the swings. "Really? I'd love to meet him." Jake stopped short when he saw her, suddenly shy in the way 4-year-olds could be around strangers. He pressed against Daniel's leg, peering up at Emily with wide eyes. "Hey, Jake," Emily said, crouching down to his level instead of looming over him. "Your dad told me you're really into dinosaurs, is that true?" Jake nodded, still cautious. "That's so cool. I had a student last year who knew everything about velociraptors. Do you have a favorite dinosaur?" "Brachiosaurus," Jake said quietly. "They're the tallest." "Wow, that's a great choice. I bet you know a lot about them." Something in Emily's tone, genuine interest without condescension, made Jake relax. He pulled away from Daniel's leg and launched into a detailed explanation of why brachiosauruses were better than all other dinosaurs, complete with hand gestures showing their long necks. Emily listened like it was the most important lecture she'd ever heard, asking questions that proved she was actually paying attention. Daniel watched them interact, something warm and terrifying spreading through his chest. "Can I go on the swings?" Jake asked finally, his shyness completely evaporated. "Sure, buddy. Stay where I can see you." Jake ran off, and Emily straightened, brushing grass from her jeans. "He's wonderful." "He's a handful. All the best kids are." She sat back down on the bench, and Daniel joined her. From here they could see Jake climbing the playground structure, his dinosaur shirt bright against the gray October sky. "Thanks for bringing him. I know that wasn't the original plan. Mrs. Rodriguez had a doctor's appointment she forgot about, and my mom isn't feeling great this week. I could have canceled, but you didn't want to," Emily finished. "I'm glad. This is your life, Daniel. I want to see it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Jake slide down the metal slide and immediately run back around to do it again. Other kids played nearby, a birthday party taking over the pavilion, a toddler learning to walk on wobbly legs while his parents hovered close. "Do you want kids?" Daniel asked, the question coming out before he could second-guess it. "I know you said that was part of why your marriage ended, but I never asked what you actually wanted." Emily was quiet for a long moment, her eyes on the playground. "I used to think I didn't. That's what I told myself during the divorce, that I'd made the right choice, that my career was enough. But honestly, I don't know anymore. I think what I didn't want was to have kids just because it was expected, to become a mother before I was ready and end up resenting everyone involved. That's fair. But sitting here, watching Jake, seeing how you are with him—" She trailed off, then seemed to decide something. "I think I could want that. with the right person at the right time. Does that make sense? Yeah, it does. Daniel felt relief flood through him, though he hadn't realized how tense he'd been waiting for her answer. I never planned on being a single father. I thought I'd have a partner, someone to share it with. But Jake's the best thing that ever happened to me, even if it's also the hardest. He's lucky to have you. Some days, I'm not sure about that. Emily turned to face him fully. You know what I see? A man who reorganized his entire life around his son, who works 60-hour weeks to support him, who reads him dinosaur books and takes him to the dentist and shows up even when he's exhausted. Jake might not understand that now, but he will. And he'll know he was loved completely. Daniel had to look away, emotion tightening his throat. You barely know us. I know enough. Her hand found his on the bench between them, fingers sliding into place like they belonged there. And I'd like to know more, if you'll let me. Before Daniel could respond, Jake came running over, breathless and excited. Dad, there's a big slide. Can I go on it? Let me see which one. Daniel stood, letting Emily's hand slip from his. Jake dragged him toward the far side of the playground, pointing at a tall spiral slide that made Daniel's protective instincts kick into overdrive. I don't know, buddy. That's pretty high. I'm big enough, please. Daniel assessed the slide, the landing, the likelihood of injury. Then he looked at his son's hopeful face and made a decision that went against every safety-conscious bone in his body. Okay, but I'm going to stand right here and watch, and you have to be careful. Jake's whoop of joy could probably be heard across the park. He scrambled up the ladder with the fearlessness of childhood, while Daniel positioned himself at the bottom, ready to catch him if something went wrong. Emily appeared beside him. You're doing the anxious parent hover thing. He's 4. Everything is dangerous. True, but he's also capable. Look at him. Daniel watched Jake reach the top of the slide, hesitate for just a second, then launch himself down with absolute confidence. He landed at the bottom with a bump and a giggle, immediately running back around to go again. See, Emily said. He's fine. This time, ask me again when he breaks his arm. When, not if. Have you met children? Broken bones are inevitable. They watched Jake go down 3 more times before he got distracted by a group of kids playing tag. He looked back at Daniel with a silent question on his face. Go ahead, Daniel called. Stay in the playground. Jake joined the game with the easy social grace of kids who didn't overthink everything, and Daniel found himself back on the bench with Emily, hands linked again like it was the most natural thing in the world. Can I tell you something? Emily said after a while. Always. I'm really happy right now, just sitting here, watching kids play, holding your hand. It's simple and normal, and I can't remember the last time I felt this settled. Daniel squeezed her fingers. Me too. Which is weird because my kid is currently wrestling with strangers, and I should probably intervene. He's fine. They're just playing. You say that now. Wait until someone cries. As if summoned by his words, one of the kids, a little girl in a pink jacket, tripped and started wailing. The game stopped immediately, everyone freezing in that universal childhood panic of someone getting hurt. Daniel was already moving, but Jake got there first. He helped the girl up with surprising gentleness, brushing dirt off her jacket while saying something Daniel couldn't hear. The girl's crying slowed, then stopped. She smiled at Jake, who grinned back, and then they both ran off to rejoin the game. Well, Emily said when Daniel returned to the bench, I think we just witnessed some advanced empathy skills. He's good with other kids, better than I was at his age. Daniel felt that familiar swell of pride mixed with terror, pride that Jake was kind, terror that the world might take advantage of that kindness. I worry about him sometimes, that he's too trusting. He's 4. He should be trusting. The world has plenty of time to teach him cynicism. I know. I just want to protect him from everything. You can't, though. Nobody can. Emily's voice was gentle but firm. All you can do is teach him how to handle things when they go wrong. And from what I've seen, you're doing that. They stayed at the park for another hour, talking while Jake played, occasionally calling out warnings that went mostly ignored. When Jake finally ran back over, sweaty and grass-stained and completely happy, he looked at Emily with newfound comfort. Are you my dad's girlfriend? He asked with the blunt curiosity of childhood. Emily's eyes widened slightly. Daniel felt his face heat. Jake, that's not really… I don't know yet, Emily said, cutting off Daniel's fumbling. Would that be okay with you if I was? Jake considered this seriously. Do you like pizza? I love pizza. With pineapple? Especially with pineapple, Jake looked at Daniel. She can be your girlfriend. Oh well, as long as I have your permission, Daniel said, trying not to laugh at the absurdity of getting relationship approval from a 4-year-old. You're welcome, Jake said solemnly, then immediately shifted topics. I'm hungry. They ended up at a diner down the street, the kind of place with sticky menus and bottomless coffee where half the town seemed to eat lunch. Jake ordered pancakes, despite it being 3 in the afternoon, and proceeded to drown them in syrup while Emily and Daniel shared a basket of fries. So, Emily said once Jake was thoroughly occupied with his food. Girlfriend, that's a big word. He's 4. He doesn't know what it means. But we do. Oh, she stole a fry from his plate. Is that what this is? Daniel thought about deflecting, making a joke, keeping things light. But Emily had asked for honesty, and she deserved it. I don't know what to call it. I like you. I think about you constantly. I want to keep seeing you, but I also have no idea what I'm doing, and I'm terrified of screwing this up. What if we just call it what it is? 2 people who like each other, spending time together, seeing where it goes. No pressure, no expectations beyond being honest and showing up. That sounds almost healthy. Right? I'm as surprised as you are. Emily smiled and Daniel felt that now familiar flutter in his chest. But seriously, I'm not asking you to have everything figured out. I just want to be part of your life, however that looks. Even the messy parts? Especially those, the messy parts are real. Jake looked up from his pancakes, syrup on his chin. Emily, do you have a job? I do. I'm a teacher. What do you teach? English. That means reading and writing. Jake wrinkled his nose. I don't like writing. My hand gets tired. That's fair. But you like stories, right? Yeah, Dad reads me stories every night. Well, stories have to be written by someone before they can be read, so writing is how we share stories with people. Jake absorbed this with the seriousness of someone receiving profound wisdom. Okay, I guess writing is okay then. Emily caught Daniel's eye over Jake's head, her expression warm with amusement. In that moment, Daniel could see it, a future where this wasn't awkward or complicated, where Emily was just part of their lives, natural as breathing. The thought terrified him. But it also felt right in a way nothing had in years. They finished lunch, Jake's energy finally flagging as the sugar crash hit. Daniel paid the check while Emily helped Jake into his jacket, the domestic normalcy of it striking him quiet. This could be his life. This could be real. Outside the diner, Emily walked them to Daniel's truck. Jake was already half asleep against Daniel's shoulder, his small body heavy with exhaustion. Thanks for today, Daniel said quietly. For being so good with him. Thanks for including me. Emily touched Jake's back gently. He's special, Daniel. Really special. Yeah, he is. Text me later? Always. She kissed his cheek, the same quick, soft touch from their last date, and headed to her car. Daniel buckled Jake into his car seat, the little boy mumbling something about pancakes and girlfriends before his eyes closed completely. The drive home was quiet, giving Daniel time to think about Emily, about Jake, about the life he'd built and the life he might want. His phone buzzed at a red light. Emily. Your son has good taste in potential girlfriends. Tell him thanks for the approval. Daniel smiled, typing back one-handed. He also thinks dinosaurs are secretly still alive. His judgment might be questionable, or excellent. Depends on your perspective. Fair point. Same time next week? Can't wait. Over the next month, they fell into a rhythm. Dates when they could manage them. Sometimes just coffee during Daniel's lunch break. Sometimes actual dinners when Mrs. Rodriguez could watch Jake. Emily started coming to the park on Wednesday afternoons, a standing appointment that Jake looked forward to as much as Daniel did. She integrated herself into their lives gradually, never pushing, always respecting the boundaries Daniel set around his son. But she also made it clear she wasn't going anywhere, showing up consistently even when it would have been easier not to. Daniel met her sister Claire over video call, a whirlwind interrogation disguised as friendly conversation that Emily clearly found embarrassing, but Daniel thought was kind of endearing. Claire was protective, blunt, and obviously loved her sister fiercely. "Don't hurt her," Claire said when Emily left the room to grab her phone charger. "She acts tough, but she's not. Not really." "I know," Daniel said. "I'm not planning to." Nobody ever plans to. But life happens. Just be careful with her, please. "I will." When Emily came back, she caught the tail end of the conversation and rolled her eyes. "Claire, stop threatening him." "I'm not threatening. I'm advising. There's a difference." They also talked on the phone most nights after Jake went to bed, conversations that stretched for hours about nothing and everything. Emily told him about her students, the small dramas of high school life, the kid who'd finally turned in 3 months of missing homework and brought his grade from an F to a C. Daniel told her about the cars he was working on, the customers who made him laugh, the satisfaction of solving problems nobody else could figure out. "I love listening to you talk about work," Emily said one night, her voice sleepy through the phone. "You get this tone, like you're solving mysteries instead of fixing engines." Kind of is solving mysteries. Someone brings in a car that won't start, and I have to figure out why. Could be the battery, the alternator, the starter, a loose connection, bad fuel, computer issues. You test everything until you find the problem. See? Mystery solving. If you say so. "I do say so." Detective Daniel Brooks, auto investigator. "That's terrible." "You love it." And he did. He loved her terrible jokes, her genuine interest in his boring work stories, the way she never made him feel small for doing what he did. With Rachel, there'd always been this undercurrent of disappointment, like she'd expected someone different, someone more ambitious or impressive. Emily never made him feel that way. But as November arrived and the weather turned colder, reality started pressing in. Emily's father, who lived 3 hours north in the town where she grew up, had been dealing with health issues for months. Heart problems she'd mentioned once, but downplayed. Nothing serious, she'd said, just monitoring. Then one Friday evening, Daniel's phone rang while he was making dinner. Emily's name on the screen, but when he answered, her voice was wrong, tight, scared. "Daniel, I'm sorry to call. I know you're with Jake, but I didn't know who else." "What's wrong?" "It's my dad. He had a heart attack this afternoon. They did emergency surgery and he's stable now, but..." Her voice cracked. "I need to go home tonight. I'm already packing." Daniel's mind raced, trying to calculate logistics. Jake needed dinner, bath, bedtime. He had 3 cars promised for tomorrow morning. Mrs. Rodriguez was visiting her daughter this weekend. "Do you want me to come with you?" "No, God, no. You have Jake and work. And I just needed to hear your voice. I needed to tell you." She took a shaky breath. "I don't know how long I'll be gone. A week, maybe more. My mom needs help, and Claire's working double shifts, and I'm the only one who can..." "Emily, breathe." Daniel turned off the stove, moving to where Jake was playing with trucks on the living room floor. "It's okay. Go be with your family. That's exactly where you should be." "But we had plans tomorrow, and plans can wait." "Your dad can't." He kept his voice calm, steady, even though his stomach was twisting. This was it, the moment when life got complicated and people left, the moment he'd been waiting for since this started. "Drive safe, okay? Text me when you get there." "I will. I'm so sorry, Daniel." "Don't apologize. Just go." After they hung up, Daniel stood in the kitchen for a long moment, staring at the half-cooked pasta on the stove. Jake came over and tugged his pant leg. "Who was that?" "Emily. She had to go help her family." "Is she coming back?" The question, innocent, trusting, hit Daniel in the chest. "I don't know, buddy." "Oh." Jake returned to his trucks, apparently satisfied with this answer in the way only kids could be. Daniel wasn't satisfied. He finished making dinner, going through the motions automatically, gave Jake a bath, read him 2 dinosaur books, tucked him in. Then he sat on the couch with his phone, waiting for Emily's text. It came at 11:30. "Made it. Dad's sleeping. Mom's a mess. This is going to be hard. You can handle hard. You're tougher than you think." "I don't feel tough right now. That's okay. You don't have to be tough all the time." Thanks for understanding. I'm sorry I'm not there. Don't be sorry. Just take care of your family. I'll be here when you get back. If you get back, Daniel thought, but didn't type. Because some part of him, the part that Rachel had broken, didn't quite believe anyone would choose to return to him when leaving was easier. The weekend crawled by. Daniel worked on the cars he'd promised, Jake alternating between helpful and destructive in the shop. They went to the park alone, and Jake kept asking where Emily was. Daniel explained about her dad being sick, about her needing to help. But she's coming back, right? Jake asked for the third time. I hope so. Me too. I like her. Yeah, buddy, me too. Emily texted updates sporadically. Her dad was stable but weak. The recovery would take months. Her mom was overwhelmed, unable to manage everything alone. Claire was there when she could be, but her nursing shifts were unpredictable. By Monday, a pattern emerged. Good morning texts that came later and later. Brief check-ins during the day. Phone calls that kept getting postponed because something came up. Doctor appointments, insurance calls, her mom having a breakdown in the hospital cafeteria. Daniel tried to be understanding. He was understanding. But he could also feel the distance growing, not just in miles, but in attention, in presence. Emily's world had shifted, and he wasn't in it anymore. Couldn't be in it, not from 3 hours away with a kid and a business to run. You need to go up there, Marcus said the following Friday, stopping by the shop after work. Just drive up, see her in person. I can't just leave. Jake has preschool. I have customers. Mrs. Rodriguez can watch Jake overnight. You know she would. And I can handle the shop for a day. Marcus leaned against the workbench, his expression serious. Look, man, I get that you're scared, but Emily's dealing with her worst nightmare right now, and you're here sending text messages. That's not going to cut it. What am I supposed to do? Show up uninvited while she's taking care of her dad? You're supposed to show her you're not going anywhere, that when things get hard, you step up instead of pulling back. Marcus softened his tone. I know Rachel screwed you up. I know trusting someone feels impossible, but Emily isn't Rachel. And if you don't fight for this, you're going to lose it by default. Daniel wanted to argue, but Marcus was right. He'd been pulling back all week, protecting himself instead of showing up for Emily, operating from fear instead of courage. That night, after Jake was asleep, he called her. She answered on the fourth ring, sounding exhausted. Hey, sorry, it's been a crazy day. I want to come see you, Daniel interrupted. This weekend. I can get someone to watch Jake, and I just want to be there, even if it's just for a day. Silence on the other end. Then, Daniel, you don't have to do that. I know I don't have to. I want to. It's 3 hours each way, and things are chaotic here, and I won't even have much time. I don't care. I just want to see you. He took a breath. Please, let me show up for you the way you've been showing up for me. More silence. Then a sound that might have been a sob. Okay, yes, please come. They made plans. Daniel would drive up Saturday morning, stay until Sunday afternoon. Mrs. Rodriguez agreed to keep Jake overnight. Actually seemed thrilled about it, already planning activities. Marcus promised to handle any shop emergencies. Saturday morning arrived cold and gray, threatening snow. Daniel left at 6, driving through the pre-dawn darkness with coffee and nerves for company. Emily had texted her parents' address, warning him that the house was a mess, and her mom might cry when she met him. The drive gave him too much time to think about what he was doing, why he was doing it, whether this was brave or stupid. But by the time he pulled into the driveway of a modest ranch house with peeling paint and overgrown bushes, he knew he'd made the right choice. Emily opened the door before he could knock, and the relief on her face told him everything he needed to know. You came, she said. Of course I came. He pulled her into his arms, feeling how tightly she held on, how much she needed this. I'm here. Whatever you need. She buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her shake with silent sobs, the kind that came from holding everything together for too long and finally being able to break. He held her through it, one hand on her back, the other in her hair, just being present. When she finally pulled back, her eyes were red but clearer. Sorry, I've been trying to be strong for my mom, and you don't have to be strong with me. That's the whole point. She laughed wetly. Come inside, meet the chaos. The house was exactly as she'd described. cluttered with medical equipment, pill organizers, and the accumulated stuff of a lifetime. Emily's mother, Patricia, was a smaller version of Emily with gray hair and worried eyes. She hugged Daniel like they'd known each other for years. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Emily's been working so hard and I know she misses you terribly." "Mom," Emily protested, embarrassed. "It's true. You talk about him constantly." Patricia patted Daniel's arm. "Are you hungry? I made too much breakfast." The day unfolded in a series of small moments. Daniel met Emily's father, Roger, who was weak but alert, grateful for the company. They talked about cars. Roger had restored a '67 Chevelle in his 20s, and Daniel promised to send photos of the Mustang he was working on. Claire showed up mid-morning, assessed Daniel with the same protective intensity she'd shown over video call, then apparently decided he was acceptable. She put him to work immediately, having him move furniture so their dad could navigate with a walker, fix a loose step on the back porch, and reorganize the garage so the wheelchair would fit. "You're useful," Claire said approvingly. "Emily should keep you." "I'm trying my best," Daniel replied, which made Claire actually smile. But the real gift of the day was just being with Emily. Seeing her in her element, caring for her family with patience and competence, making her lunch because she kept forgetting to eat, taking her on a walk around the neighborhood just to get her out of the house for 20 minutes, holding her hand while they stood in the cold November air, breathing visible in front of them. "I'm sorry I've been distant this week," she said, leaning against him. "I didn't mean to disappear." "You didn't disappear. Your attention was somewhere it needed to be. But I also shut you out, made you think I was pulling away when really I was just drowning." Daniel turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. "Then tell me next time. Tell me you're drowning so I can help keep you afloat. Don't protect me from the hard parts, Emily. I want all of it, the good, the bad, the impossible days. That's what this is supposed to be." Tears slipped down her cheeks, and he wiped them away with his thumbs. "I was so scared," she whispered. "When my dad had the heart attack, all I could think was that I might lose him. And then I realized I was also scared of losing you, of this thing between us falling apart because I couldn't be there. I'm not that fragile, neither is this." He kissed her forehead. "We're going to have hard days, probably a lot of them. But we figure them out together, not by trying to handle everything alone." "Together," she repeated. I like the sound of that. They stood there in the cold until Patricia called them back inside for dinner. The meal was chaotic, Roger trying to do too much, Patricia worrying, Claire managing everything with efficient bossiness. But it was also warm, full of laughter despite the circumstances, proof that families could hold together even when things fell apart. Daniel left Sunday afternoon, Emily walking him to his truck. The goodbye was harder than he'd expected. "I don't know when I can come back," she said. "Dad's got weeks of rehab and Mom can't handle it alone. So I'll come to you, not every weekend, but when I can, and we'll figure out the rest." He kissed her, soft and slow. "This doesn't end just because it's hard. Promise?" "Promise. Now go inside before you freeze." The drive home felt longer, his truck too empty, but his phone buzzed regularly with texts from Emily, small updates that kept him connected. By the time he pulled into his driveway, he felt settled in a way he hadn't all week. Jake was full of stories about his weekend with Mrs. Rodriguez. They'd made cookies, watched movies, built a blanket fort. Daniel let him talk while getting him ready for bed, grateful for the normalcy. "Did you see Emily?" Jake asked as Daniel tucked him in. "I did." "Is she still your girlfriend?" "Yeah, buddy, she is." "Good." Jake yawned, already half asleep. "I like her." "Me too." Now sleep. But as Daniel headed to his own room, he realized something had shifted. The fear that had been driving him all week, the certainty that Emily would leave, had been replaced by something stronger. Not certainty that everything would work out, but faith that they'd try. That they'd show up for each other, even when it was hard. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The weeks that followed tested every promise they'd made to each other. Emily remained at her parents' house, juggling her father's recovery with her teaching responsibilities through a combination of video lessons and substitute teachers. Daniel drove up twice more, stealing whatever hours he could manage between Jake's schedule and the shop. Their relationship existed in fragments, late-night phone calls, hurried video chats while Jake played in the background, text messages that sometimes took hours to answer. By mid-December, the strain was showing in ways neither wanted to acknowledge. "I can't keep doing this," Emily said during a rare phone call that lasted longer than 10 minutes. It was nearly midnight, and Daniel could hear the exhaustion in her voice. "My principal called today. Said if I can't return after winter break, they'll have to find a permanent replacement." Daniel sat up in bed, alarm cutting through his own tiredness. "What did you tell him?" "That I'd let him know by the end of the week. But Daniel, I don't see how I can leave. Dad's getting stronger, but he still needs help with everything. Physical therapy 4 times a week, medications, dietary restrictions Mom can't keep track of. Claire's pulling double shifts at the hospital, and we can't afford to hire full-time care." "So what are you saying?" The question came out harder than he intended, fear sharpening his words. "I don't know what I'm saying. I'm tired. And I miss you. And I feel like I'm failing at everything, teaching, caregiving, being your girlfriend. I can't be in 2 places at once." Daniel wanted to tell her it would be okay, that they'd figure it out. But he was tired too. Tired of single-parent responsibilities that never ended, of running a business that demanded constant attention, of maintaining a relationship through screens and distance. The old instinct to pull back, to protect himself before things fell apart completely, whispered that maybe this was too hard, that love shouldn't require this much effort. But then he remembered Emily's face when he'd shown up at her parents' house, the way she'd held on to him like he was the only solid thing in her world, the promise they'd made to show up for each other, especially when it was hard. "Come home for Christmas," he said, "just for 2 days. Your mom and Claire can manage, and you need a break before you burn out completely." "I can't just abandon." "It's not abandoning. It's taking care of yourself so you can keep taking care of them." Daniel softened his voice. "Please, Emily, come home. See me and Jake. Remember why you're fighting so hard to make this work." The silence stretched long enough that Daniel thought she might refuse. Then she sighed, and he could hear the surrender in it. "Okay, 2 days, but I'm driving back on the 26th. That's fine. 2 days is enough." Except when Christmas arrived and Emily pulled into his driveway late on Christmas Eve, Daniel realized 2 days would never be enough. She looked thinner, dark circles under her eyes, moving with the careful exhaustion of someone running on fumes. But when Jake barreled out the front door yelling her name, her whole face transformed. "Hey, buddy!" She caught him in a hug, lifting him despite clearly not having the strength for it. "I missed you so much. I made you a picture. It's dinosaurs and you and Dad and me." Jake wriggled free, grabbing her hand. "Come see, come see." Daniel watched from the doorway as Jake dragged Emily inside, chattering about everything she'd missed. The Christmas tree he'd helped decorate, the cookies they'd made for Santa, the new dinosaur book Mrs. Rodriguez had given him. Emily listened with genuine attention, asking questions, admiring Jake's artwork on the refrigerator. When Jake finally ran off to find more things to show her, Emily collapsed onto the couch with a groan. "How do you do this every day? I've been here 5 minutes and I'm exhausted." "You get used to it. Kind of." Daniel sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "How was the drive?" "Long. I left at 5 this morning because I wanted to miss traffic." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Tell me I made the right choice coming here." "You made the right choice." He wrapped an arm around her, feeling how tightly she pressed against him. "How's your dad?" "Better. Still weak, but the doctors are optimistic. He might be able to go back to work part-time in a few months." Emily was quiet for a moment. "My mom, though, she's struggling. Not just with taking care of him, but with the fear. She keeps having panic attacks about losing him, about what happens if he has another heart attack." "That's understandable." "It is, but it also means she can't be left alone with him for more than an hour or two. She freezes up, can't remember what to do." Emily's voice cracked slightly. "Claire and I have to coordinate our schedules, so someone's always there. It's like having a second full-time job." Daniel tightened his arm around her. "That's not sustainable." "I know, but what choice do we have?" She pulled back to look at him. "I'm sorry. I promised myself I wouldn't dump all this on you the second I arrived." "Don't apologize. I asked how you were doing. This is the real answer." He brushed hair back from her face. "I'm glad you're here, even if it's just for 2 days." "Me too." She managed a smile. So what's the plan? I saw you have a tree up. Jake insisted. We're doing Christmas morning tomorrow. Opening presents, making pancakes, the whole thing. I thought maybe tonight we could just relax. Watch a movie after he goes to bed. Pretend the outside world doesn't exist for a few hours. That sounds perfect. They made it through dinner, leftover lasagna Daniel had made the night before, and Jake's insistence on showing Emily every single toy he owned. By 8 o'clock, Jake was yawning despite his protests that he wasn't tired. Santa won't come if you're still awake, Daniel warned. But Emily just got here. And she'll still be here in the morning, I promise. Daniel scooped Jake up. Say goodnight. Jake wrapped his arms around Emily's neck. You won't leave while I'm sleeping? The question clearly hit Emily hard. She hugged him tighter. No, sweetheart. I'll be here when you wake up. Promise? Promise. After Daniel got Jake settled, which took 3 stories and 2 glasses of water, he found Emily standing by the Christmas tree, staring at the lights like they held answers to questions she hadn't asked. He's worried I'll disappear, she said without turning around. 4 years old and he already understands that people leave. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Rachel leaving wasn't your fault. I know, but I also know what it did to him, to you. She turned in his arms. I don't want to be another person who promises to stay and then doesn't. Then don't make promises you can't keep. The words came out sharper than he meant, and Emily flinched. That's not fair. Isn't it? You're 3 hours away with no clear timeline for coming back. Your job might not be there. You're stretched so thin you can barely function. At some point something has to give, Emily, and I need to know if it's going to be us. Her eyes widened, hurt flashing across her face. You think I want this? You think I'm choosing my parents over you? I think you're in an impossible situation, and I think eventually you're going to have to make a choice about where your life is, here or there. That's not a choice. They're my parents, Daniel. I can't just abandon them. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be honest about what's realistic. Because right now we're pretending we can make this work long term, and I don't think we can. Emily stepped back, wrapping her arms around herself. So what are you saying? That we should just give up? I'm saying we should be realistic about what we're doing to each other. You feel guilty every time we talk because you can't give me more attention. I feel guilty for wanting more when I know you're dealing with a crisis. We're both exhausted and resentful and trying to pretend we're not. I'm not resentful. Aren't you? Even a little? Because I am. I'm resentful that your dad got sick and took you away. I'm resentful that I can't fix this. I'm resentful that loving you has become this hard when it started so easy. The words hung between them, ugly and true. Emily's face crumpled, tears spilling over. I can't believe you're doing this on Christmas Eve. When else would I do it? This is the first time we've been in the same room in 3 weeks. Daniel felt his own eyes burn. I don't want to fight, Emily, but I also can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. So what do you want from me? Tell me what you need and I'll do it. I need you to figure out what you want. Not what your parents need, not what I need, not what Jake needs. What you want. Because until you know that, we're just treading water. Emily wiped her face with shaking hands. I want both. I want to be there for my parents and be here with you. I want to teach and take care of my dad and have a relationship. Why can't I have both? Because you're one person with finite time and energy, and trying to do everything means doing nothing well. She stared at him for a long moment, then grabbed her coat from the back of the couch. I need some air. Emily, wait! But she was already out the door, leaving Daniel standing alone in the living room with the Christmas tree lights mocking him with their cheerfulness. He sank onto the couch, head in his hands, wondering if he'd just destroyed the best thing that had happened to him in years. His phone buzzed. Marcus. Merry Christmas Eve, man. Hope you're having a good night with Emily. Daniel stared at the message, then typed back, I think I just ruined everything. The phone rang immediately. What happened? Daniel explained the fight in halting sentences, shame creeping in as he heard his own words out loud. I basically told her she has to choose between me and her parents. What kind of person does that? The kind who's scared and tired and doesn't know how to ask for what he needs without it coming out wrong, Marcus said. Where is she now? Outside somewhere. She needed air. And you let her go. What was I supposed to do? Chase her down and make it worse? You're supposed to go after her and apologize for being an idiot. Marcus's voice was firm. Look, you're not wrong that this situation is unsustainable, but you can't drop that on her and then let her walk away thinking you're giving up. Go find her. Talk to her like you actually want to solve this instead of just being right. Daniel looked out the window, seeing nothing but darkness and the glow of Christmas lights from neighboring houses. What if she doesn't want to talk to me? Then you stand there in the cold until she does. But my guess? She's out there hoping you'll come after her, so go. The call ended, and Daniel grabbed his own coat. He checked on Jake one more time, still sleeping, clutching his dinosaur, then headed outside. He found Emily sitting on the curb at the end of his driveway, arms wrapped around her knees, shoulders shaking. She didn't look up when he approached, but she didn't tell him to leave either. Daniel sat beside her, their breath visible in the cold December air. Christmas lights twinkled from houses up and down the street, and somewhere a dog barked. They sat in silence for a long time before Emily finally spoke. "I'm so tired of feeling like I'm failing everyone," she said quietly. "My parents need me. My students need me. You and Jake need me. And I can't be enough for any of you." "That's not true." "It is. I see it in my mom's face every time I mention leaving, in my principal's emails asking when I'm coming back, in the way you look at me like you're waiting for me to disappear." She turned to face him, tears tracking down her cheeks. "And the worst part is, I don't know what the right choice is. Every option feels like I'm betraying someone." Daniel reached for her hand, relieved when she didn't pull away. "I'm sorry for how I said all that, for making you feel like you had to choose. But you weren't wrong. Something has to give. I can't keep splitting myself into pieces and expecting it not to break me. So let's figure out what gives. Together." He squeezed her hand. "What if we stopped trying to maintain what we had before and built something new, something that fits the reality we're actually living in?" "What does that look like?" "I don't know yet, but maybe it means accepting that you need to be there for a while longer, that your job might change or you might have to take a leave of absence, that we won't see each other as much as we want, and that's okay because we're working towards something instead of just surviving." Daniel paused. "And maybe it means bringing Jake to visit you sometimes instead of making you always come here, sharing the burden instead of you carrying it alone." Emily's expression shifted, hope flickering through the exhaustion. "You'd do that? Drive up with Jake?" "Why wouldn't I? He likes your parents, and it would give you some relief, someone to help with your dad, someone to make you take breaks. Plus, it would mean we actually get to be together instead of just talking about being together." "What about the shop?" "Marcus can handle it for a weekend here and there, and if he can't, the cars will wait. They're just cars, Emily. You're more important." She let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I don't deserve you." "Yeah, you do, and I don't deserve you, which means we're probably perfect for each other." Daniel pulled her closer, and she collapsed against him. "I'm sorry I made this about choosing. You shouldn't have to choose between loving your parents and loving me." "I do love you," she whispered. "I should have said it before, but I was scared. Everything felt so fragile." "I love you too. Have since that first date, probably. I was just too stubborn to admit it." He kissed the top of her head. "We're going to figure this out. It won't look like we planned, but we'll make it work." They sat on the curb until Emily started shivering despite her coat, then headed back inside. The house was warm and quiet, Jake still sleeping peacefully. Daniel made hot chocolate while Emily curled up on the couch, and they spent the rest of the evening talking through logistics, possibilities, what the next few months might look like. "I need to go back to my principal and ask for a leave of absence," Emily said around midnight, her head in Daniel's lap while he played with her hair. "Not quitting, just acknowledging I can't be there right now. Maybe they'll hold my position, maybe they won't, but I can't keep pretending I can do both." "That's brave." "It's terrifying. Teaching is my whole identity." "No, it's not. It's what you do, not who you are. You're also a daughter and a sister and my girlfriend and the person who convinced Jake that writing might not be completely terrible." Daniel looked down at her. "And you're someone who shows up for people she loves, even when it's hard. That's who you are." Emily reached up to touch his face. "When did you get so wise?" I've been faking it this whole time. Don't tell anyone. She laughed, the sound lighter than it had been in weeks. They talked until almost 2 in the morning, making plans and promises that felt more solid than the ones they'd made before. Not promises about forever, but promises about tomorrow, about showing up, about trying. Christmas morning arrived with Jake bouncing on Daniel's bed at 6:30, yelling about Santa. Emily stumbled out of the guest room looking exhausted but smiling, and they spent the morning in a chaos of wrapping paper and excited shrieks. Jake loved every present, but his favorite was the remote control dinosaur Daniel and Emily had bought together online, their first joint gift. He made it chase Emily around the living room while she pretended to be terrified, and Daniel captured the whole thing on video, saving it to watch later when things got hard again. They made pancakes for lunch because breakfast had been forgotten in the present excitement. Emily taught Jake how to flip them without making a mess, only moderately successful. Daniel burned the first batch and blamed the stove. It was domestic and chaotic and perfect. I wish every day could be like this, Emily said that evening after Jake had crashed hard from sugar and excitement. They were back on the couch, watching It's a Wonderful Life with the sound low. We'll have more days like this, maybe not as many as we want, but enough. Daniel pulled her closer. You're still leaving tomorrow? I have to, but I'll come back in 2 weeks. And you'll bring Jake up the weekend after that? Absolutely. We'll make it a routine. You're not doing this alone anymore. Emily tilted her face up to kiss him, slow and sweet and full of promises they'd actually keep this time. When she pulled back, her eyes were serious. I know this is still hard, that we're still figuring things out, but I need you to know something. What? I'm not giving up. On us? On this? No matter how complicated it gets, I'm not walking away. She took his hand, threading their fingers together. You and Jake, you've become my reason to keep going when everything else feels impossible. So even when I'm 3 hours away and we're both exhausted and nothing makes sense, remember that I chose you. I'm choosing you every single day. Daniel felt emotion close his throat. I'm choosing you too, even when I'm scared, even when it's hard, especially then. They fell asleep on the couch, wrapped around each other, the movie long finished and the Christmas tree lights still glowing. When Daniel woke at 3 in the morning with a crick in his neck, he carefully extracted himself and carried Emily to the guest room, tucking her in like he did with Jake. She stirred slightly, reaching for him. Stay? Always. He climbed in beside her, and she immediately curled against him, fitting perfectly, like she'd been designed for this exact spot. Morning came too soon. Emily packed while Jake followed her around, asking when she'd be back, if she liked all her presents, whether she'd tell her dad about the dinosaur. She answered patiently, crouching down to hug him tight. I'll see you in 2 weeks, okay? And I'll call before bedtime so we can say goodnight. Promise? Promise. She looked up at Daniel over Jake's head, and he saw his own heartbreak reflected there. He walked her to her car, Jake waving from the front door. Drive safe. Text me when you get there. I will. Emily stood on her toes to kiss him. Thank you for Christmas, for everything, for not giving up on me when I gave you plenty of reasons to. I told you, I'm choosing you. That doesn't change just because you're leaving. I'll be back. 2 weeks. I'll be counting. She got in her car and he watched her drive away, that familiar ache settling in his chest. But this time it felt different. Not like an ending, but like a pause, a breath before the next chapter. Jake came out to stand beside him, slipping his small hand into Daniel's larger one. She's coming back, right? Yeah, buddy, she's coming back. Good. Jake squeezed his hand. I love her. Daniel squeezed back, his vision blurring slightly. Me too. They stood there until Emily's car disappeared around the corner, then headed back inside to clean up the Christmas chaos. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Emily. Already miss you. Thank you for believing in us, always. Drive safe. Love you. Love you too. See you soon. The house felt quieter without her, emptier in ways it hadn't before she'd arrived, but it also felt full of something new. Possibility, maybe. Hope that this wasn't just a relationship doomed by distance and circumstance, but something they were building together, piece by piece. That night, after Jake was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a calendar and started mapping out visits. Weekends he could take off, times when Mrs. Rodriguez could watch Jake overnight, how they could split the driving. It wouldn't be easy. Some weeks they wouldn't see each other at all, but they'd talk, text, make it work however they could. His phone rang, Emily's face filling the screen. "Hey, you home safe?" "Just walked in. Mom was so happy to see me, she cried. Dad's already asking when you and Jake are visiting." Emily sounded tired but lighter. "I talked to them about the leave of absence. They feel terrible about me having to do it, but they also understand. Claire's going to look into part-time care options so I can eventually go back." "That's good, really good." "I also realized something driving home. I've been so focused on not letting anyone down that I forgot what actually matters. My dad's going to recover. My mom's going to figure out how to manage her anxiety. My job will either be there or it won't. But you, us, that's what I can't lose. That's what I'm fighting for." Daniel felt warmth spread through his chest. We're fighting for it together. That's the difference. They talked for another hour, not about logistics or problems, but about Jake's favorite presents, the terrible movie they'd watched, small moments from the day that mattered simply because they'd shared them. When they finally said goodnight, Daniel felt more certain than he had in weeks. This was hard. It would stay hard for a while, maybe a long while. But hard didn't mean impossible. It meant working for something worth having. And Emily, this relationship, this life they were building, was worth every difficult mile between them. 2 weeks later, Daniel kept his promise. He and Jake made the 3-hour drive north on a Saturday morning, arriving to find Emily waiting on her parents' porch with the biggest smile he'd seen in months. Jake ran to her like he'd been launched from a cannon, and she caught him, spinning him around while he giggled. Daniel followed more slowly, taking in the sight of them together, his son and the woman he loved, both laughing in the winter sunshine. When he reached them, Emily's free hand found his, and they stood there like that for a moment, a family in the making. "Welcome home," Emily said softly. And standing there with her hand in his and Jake chattering about the drive, Daniel realized something important. Home wasn't a place. It was people who chose each other, day after day, through distance and difficulty and fear. It was this, them, together. And that was worth fighting for, no matter how hard it got. The winter months that followed became a study in persistence. Daniel and Emily built a rhythm out of chaos, weekends alternating between his town and hers, phone calls that lasted until one of them fell asleep mid-sentence, video chats where Jake showed Emily his latest dinosaur discoveries while she graded papers in the background. It wasn't the relationship either had imagined, but it was theirs, and they held on to it with everything they had. By February, Roger's recovery had progressed enough that he could manage short walks with a cane and handle most of his own daily care. Patricia's anxiety had improved with therapy and the knowledge that her husband was truly getting stronger. Claire had found a part-time nurse who came 3 mornings a week, giving Emily blocks of time to focus on her online teaching work. She'd negotiated a compromise with her principal, teaching virtually until the end of the school year. "I think I can come home," Emily said one Thursday evening in late February. Daniel was in his garage working late on a transmission rebuild, phone propped on the workbench. "Not permanently yet, but maybe for a week. Spring break is coming up and Claire can take time off. I could actually spend more than 2 days with you." Daniel straightened from the engine he'd been examining, grease-stained hands frozen mid-movement. "A whole week? If you want me. I know it's a lot having someone in your space that long." "Emily, stop. Of course I want you here. Jake's going to lose his mind." Daniel wiped his hands on a rag, already mentally rearranging his schedule. "When? Week after next? I drive down Saturday morning, stay through the following Sunday." Her voice held barely contained excitement. "We could actually have normal days. Dinners together, taking Jake to the park, just being boring and domestic." "That sounds perfect." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for months. "We'll make it work. Whatever you need." The week Emily was coming seemed to crawl by with deliberate slowness. Jake counted down the days on a calendar they'd made together, crossing off each one with increasing excitement. Daniel found himself cleaning the house with unprecedented thoroughness, changing sheets, stocking the refrigerator with food Emily liked, trying to make the small space feel welcoming for more than just a weekend visit. Marcus noticed the extra effort when he stopped by the shop on Friday. "You're nervous." "I'm not nervous." "You reorganized your entire garage last night, Steve told me. You texted him at 11 asking if you should buy new towels." Marcus leaned against the Mustang Daniel had finally finished. "It's okay to be nervous. This is different than weekend visits." What if it's too much? What if a whole week makes her realize she can't actually live like this? Daniel set down his wrench harder than necessary. "We've been doing the long-distance thing for 4 months, but actually being here in my life with Jake full-time, seeing how small and ordinary everything is, then she'll see the truth, that you're a good man with a good life who loves her. Stop catastrophizing." Marcus's expression softened. Emily knows what she's signing up for. She's been coming here every other weekend since Christmas. She's seen your messy house and your demanding kid and your 60-hour work weeks, and she keeps coming back. "I know, you're right. I just want it to be perfect." But perfect is boring, man. Real is better. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected warmth, an early taste of spring that made Daniel think maybe this was a good sign. He and Jake were outside when Emily pulled up, Jake having insisted on waiting on the porch for the past 20 minutes despite Daniel's attempts to distract him indoors. Emily emerged from her car looking tired from the drive but smiling, and Jake launched himself at her with his usual enthusiasm. She caught him, staggering slightly, and Daniel was there to steady them both, his hand on Emily's back, the three of them tangled together in greeting. "Hey," Daniel said softly, close enough to see the gold flecks in Emily's brown eyes. "Hey yourself." She kissed him, quick and warm, then longer when Jake squirmed to be put down. "I missed you. You saw me last weekend. I know, still missed you." She grabbed her bag from the car while Jake ran circles around them, chattering about everything they were going to do. Is he always this energetic? This is actually calm for him. Wait until he's had sugar. They settled into the house with surprising ease. Emily knew where things were from previous visits, the guest room that had become essentially hers, the specific coffee mug she preferred, how to work the temperamental shower. But having her there for more than a fleeting weekend changed the energy of the space, made it feel fuller, more alive. That first day unfolded with comfortable domesticity. They took Jake to the park, where he immediately found other kids to play with while Daniel and Emily sat on their usual bench. Came home for lunch, made sandwiches together in the small kitchen, elbows bumping and hands brushing in ways that felt both familiar and thrilling. Spent the afternoon doing nothing special, Emily reading on the couch while Daniel taught Jake how to identify different types of wrenches in the garage, both of them covered in harmless motor oil by the time Emily came to check on them. "You're teaching him automotive repair at 4?" Emily leaned against the doorframe, amusement dancing across her face. "He asked. I'm just answering questions." Daniel looked at his son, who was attempting to organize socket wrenches by size with intense concentration. "Besides, never too early to learn useful skills." "Fair enough, but maybe warn me before he starts asking to rebuild the engine on my car." That evening, they made dinner together. Nothing fancy, just pasta and salad, but the act of cooking side by side felt significant. Jake set the table with mismatched enthusiasm, and they ate while he told Emily elaborate stories about his preschool friends, most of which probably weren't entirely accurate but were entertaining nonetheless. After dinner, Daniel did the dishes while Emily helped Jake with his bath, their voices and splashing carrying through the small house. When he finished and went to check on them, he found Emily sitting on the bathroom floor, soaked from Jake's enthusiastic water play, laughing while Jake explained why dinosaurs couldn't actually take baths because their arms were too short. "Your logic is flawless," Emily told him seriously, "but you still have to wash behind your ears." "Why?" "Because your dad will check, and if you didn't do it, you have to get back in the tub." Jake considered this, then scrubbed behind his ears with exaggerated thoroughness. Daniel caught Emily's eye over Jake's head, and something passed between them, recognition of how easily she'd slipped into this role, how naturally she'd learned to navigate Jake's particular logic and stubborn streaks. Later, after Jake was in bed and they were finally alone, Emily curled against Daniel on the couch, her hair still damp from the shower she'd taken after the bath incident. "I like this," she said quietly. "Being here, being part of the routine. It feels right." Daniel played with her fingers, studying the way their hands fit together. "Even the chaotic parts?" "Especially those. The chaos means it's real." She shifted to look up at him. "I've been thinking about something." "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just big." Emily sat up, pulling her knees to her chest. "My dad's doing really well. The doctor said yesterday that he's exceeded all their expectations. Mom's managing better with the nurse's help. And Claire pointed out that I've been using their situation as an excuse to avoid making decisions about my own life." Daniel's heart started beating faster. "What kind of decisions?" "About where I want to be. What I want to do." Emily met his eyes. "My school offered to hold my position for next year if I want to come back. But I've also been looking at teaching jobs here. In your town." The words hung in the air, too big to fully process immediately. "Here? You want to move here?" "I want to move toward you." "Toward us. Toward the life we keep talking about building but never actually start because we're always apart." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "I'm not saying it would happen immediately. I need to finish out the virtual teaching, and my lease isn't up until July. But I've been pretending I could keep splitting myself between two places indefinitely, and I can't. At some point, I have to choose where my home is. And you're choosing here." Daniel heard the wonder in his own voice. "I'm choosing you, this." She gestured around the small living room toward Jake's bedroom, encompassing their entire small world. "If you want me, if this is what you want too." Daniel pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly he probably should have worried about crushing her but couldn't quite manage it. "Of course I want you. I've wanted you here permanently since about the third date. I just didn't think it was fair to ask." "You're not asking, I'm offering." Emily pulled back enough to see his face. "But I need you to be sure, really sure, because moving here means I'm all in. No more safety net of being 3 hours away. No more excuses to leave when things get hard. It's me and you and Jake figuring out how to be a family." "A family," Daniel repeated, testing the word. It felt right. Felt like something he'd been moving toward without fully acknowledging. "Yeah, that's what I want. What we both want." They stayed up late that night talking through logistics and possibilities. Where Emily would live initially, probably her own place to start, they agreed, letting Jake adjust gradually rather than overwhelming him. How they'd navigate parenting together when Emily wasn't actually Jake's parent, what boundaries needed to exist, what new rhythms they'd have to build. It was practical and emotional and terrifying and exciting all at once. Sunday morning, they took Jake to the farmer's market, an outing Daniel had been doing alone for months, but which felt entirely different with Emily there. She held Jake's hand while he examined produce with intense seriousness, helped him pick out flowers for Mrs. Rodriguez, chatted easily with the vendors Daniel had been buying from for years. "Your girlfriend is lovely," Mrs. Chen from the flower stall said while Jake was distracted by a display of sunflowers. "You should keep her." "Planning on it," Daniel said, finding Emily in the crowd and feeling that now familiar swell of emotion. They spent the afternoon at the lake where they'd had their first date. The cafe closed for renovations, but the shoreline accessible. Jake threw rocks into the water with fierce determination while Daniel and Emily sat on the grass, shoulders touching. "I'm scared," Emily admitted quietly. "About moving here, changing everything. What happens if it doesn't work?" "Me too. Terrified, actually." Daniel found her hand in the grass between them. "But I'm more scared of not trying, of letting you go because it's easier than fighting for this. We've been fighting for it for 4 months already." "Exactly. And we're still here, still choosing each other." He looked at her profile, memorizing the curve of her jaw, the way afternoon light caught in her hair. "That has to mean something. It means everything." Emily turned to kiss him, soft and sure. "I love you. Even when it's hard. Maybe especially then. I love you too. We're going to make this work." Jake ran back over, demanding they come see the really big rock he'd found, and they followed him to the water's edge, both listening with exaggerated interest while he explained its geological significance with preschool certainty. The week progressed with a comfortable rhythm that Daniel had never quite experienced before. Mornings where they all had breakfast together before he went to the shop, and Emily logged into her virtual classroom. Afternoons where she'd sometimes bring her laptop to the garage and grade papers while he worked, both of them in the same space doing separate things but together nonetheless. Evenings of cooking dinner, helping Jake with various projects. The mundane routines of daily life that somehow felt profound because they were shared. Wednesday night, Daniel had to work late on an emergency repair. A teenager's car that had died on the highway, parents frantic to get it fixed before school the next day. He texted Emily around 7 that he'd be home late, and she responded immediately that she'd handle Jake's bedtime. When he finally got home after 10, exhausted and covered in more grease than usual, he found the house quiet and clean. Emily was on the couch with her laptop, red pen in hand, stacks of essays around her. "Hey," she said softly, setting aside her work. "There's dinner in the fridge. I made that chicken thing you like." Daniel felt something crack open in his chest. The simple domesticity of it, her making him dinner, taking care of Jake, being here when he came home late from work. It was everything he'd wanted and been too scared to hope for. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to. You've been feeding me all week. Figured I should contribute." Emily stood, stretching. "Jake went down around 8:30. He asked for you, but I read him 3 dinosaur books and he eventually crashed." "Thank you, really." Daniel wanted to hug her but was too dirty. "Let me shower, then I'll eat." "Take your time. I'll heat up the food." 20 minutes later, clean and in sweatpants, Daniel found Emily in the kitchen with a plate of chicken and vegetables steaming on the counter. She'd even opened a beer for him, condensation already forming on the bottle. "You're incredible," he said, pulling her close despite her half-hearted protests about him still being damp from the shower. "I heated up leftovers. That's hardly incredible." "It's not about the food." Daniel kissed her temple. "It's about coming home to you, to this. I could get used to it." "Good. Because you're going to have to." Emily pulled back to look at him. "I talked to my principal today, gave him my official notice that I won't be returning next year." Daniel's hands tightened on her waist. "You're sure?" "Completely. I've also been applying to schools here. Had a phone interview with the high school this afternoon, actually. They're looking for an English teacher starting in the fall." "How'd it go?" "Really well. They want me to come in for an in-person interview next week." Emily's eyes were bright with excitement and nerves. "This is really happening, Daniel. I'm really doing this." "We're really doing this," he corrected. "Together." They stayed in the kitchen talking while Daniel ate, Emily stealing bites of chicken and telling him about the interview questions, her plans for the next few months, how she'd already started looking at rental houses in town. It all felt surreal and solid at the same time, like the future they'd been carefully constructing was finally taking shape. Thursday afternoon, Daniel left the shop early to take all 3 of them to Jake's preschool spring celebration, an elaborate name for what was essentially organized chaos involving finger painting and too many cookies. Emily came as Daniel's guest, and watching her interact with Jake's teachers, with the other parents, seeing how easily she fit into this part of his life, made something settle in Daniel's chest that had been restless for months. "Your girlfriend is wonderful with children," Jake's teacher, Miss Sarah, said, watching Emily help a small girl reach the craft supplies. "Jake talks about her constantly." "Yes, she is." Daniel found Emily in the crowd again, saw her laughing at something one of the kids said. "I'm going to marry her someday." The words came out before he'd fully thought them through, but once said, Daniel realized they were absolutely true. Not now, not rushed, but someday. When the time was right. When they'd built enough foundation that forever felt possible instead of terrifying. Miss Sarah smiled knowingly. "I can see why. She's a keeper." That evening, after Jake had crashed hard from too much sugar and excitement, Daniel and Emily sat on the back porch with blankets wrapped around them, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. "I told Jake's teacher I'm going to marry you someday," Daniel said, the confession easier in darkness. Emily was quiet for a long moment. "Someday?" "Yeah. Not tomorrow, not next month. But when we've figured out how to actually live in the same place, when Jake's had time to adjust to you being around more, when it feels like the next natural step instead of something we're forcing." Daniel found her hand under the blanket. "Is that okay?" That I'm thinking that far ahead? It's more than okay. Emily's voice was thick with emotion. I've been thinking it too. Every time Jake calls me to say goodnight, every time you drive 3 hours just to spend a day with me, every time we choose this, even when it's hard, I think about how this is the person I want to build a life with. So we're on the same page. Completely on the same page. She leaned against him. But you're right that we should take our time. Make sure we get the foundation solid first. They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in blankets and each other, until the cold drove them inside. Daniel checked on Jake one more time, a habit he couldn't break, and found Emily already in the guest room, changed into pajamas, looking at her phone. Everything okay? He asked from the doorway. Just texting my mom. She wants to know when we're all coming to visit. Emily patted the bed beside her. Come sit for a minute. Daniel sat, and Emily immediately curled against him. Your mom wants us to visit? All of us. She said, and I quote, I want to spend time with my future son-in-law and grandson. Emily laughed. I told her we weren't engaged yet, and she said yet was the operative word. Your family's very confident in us. They should be. We've survived 4 months of long-distance relationship during a family crisis. If we can handle that, we can handle anything. Daniel kissed the top of her head. I should let you sleep. Early morning tomorrow. Stay a little longer? Emily's voice was small. I know you have boundaries about Jake seeing us together too much, and that's good. But we have 3 more nights, and then I'm back to being 3 hours away for another 2 weeks. I just want a few more minutes. So Daniel stayed, both of them fully clothed on top of the covers, talking quietly about nothing important until Emily's breathing evened out, and he realized she'd fallen asleep. He stayed a few minutes longer, just watching her, thinking about how this woman had appeared in his life when he'd been sure love was something that happened to other people. How she'd been patient with his fears, persistent through distance, willing to uproot her entire life to build something new with him. Finally, carefully, he extracted himself and headed to his own room. Sleep came easily, his last thought before drifting off that tomorrow Emily would still be here. And the day after. And the day after that. By the time Sunday arrived, Emily's last day before driving back north, Daniel found himself fighting the familiar dread of goodbye. But this time it felt different, less like an ending and more like a pause before something bigger began. They spent the morning at the park one last time, Jake playing with new friends while Daniel and Emily sat close, hands linked, not talking much because they'd said everything that needed saying during the week. 2 more months, Emily said finally. Then I'm here for good. 2 months isn't that long. It feels like forever. She rested her head on his shoulder. But we've done 4 months already. We can do 2 more. That afternoon, they made cookies with Jake, the kitchen becoming a disaster of flour and chocolate chips. Emily took a video of Jake's chocolate-covered face, sending it to her parents with the caption, "Your future grandson is a mess." Patricia responded within minutes with a string of heart emojis and a demand for more visits. Evening came too quickly. Emily packed while Jake helped, which mostly meant slowing down the process by asking questions about every item she put in her bag. When her car was loaded and it was time to actually leave, Jake threw his arms around her waist and refused to let go. I don't want you to leave, he said, muffled against her stomach. Emily crouched down to his level, her eyes suspiciously bright. I know, sweetheart. I don't want to leave either, but I'll be back in 2 weeks, and then we're going to your dad's friend's wedding together, remember? But that's so many days. I know, but we can video chat before bed every night, and I'll send you pictures of anything cool I see. Deal? Jake considered this, then nodded solemnly. Deal, but you have to come back. I promise. Emily hugged him tight. I'm always going to come back. Daniel walked Emily to her car, while Jake watched from the porch, waving periodically. At the driver's door, Emily turned to face him, and Daniel saw his own reluctance reflected in her expression. I hate this part, she said. Me too, but it's the last time we do it like this. Next time you come back, you're staying. Daniel cupped her face in his hands. 2 months, and then you're home. Home, Emily repeated, smiling through tears. I like the sound of that. They kissed goodbye. Not briefly like usual, but thoroughly, a promise and a reassurance all at once. When they finally separated, Emily was definitely crying, and Daniel wasn't far behind. I love you, she said. "So much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too. Drive safe. Text me every hour." "I will." She got in the car, rolled down the window. "Daniel, thank you for this week, for letting me into your life completely. It meant everything. Thank you for choosing to be here, for choosing us." He stood in the driveway with Jake until her car disappeared, then scooped up his son and headed inside. The house felt emptier without Emily, but it also felt full of her presence. The coffee mug she'd used that morning still in the sink, her favorite blanket folded on the couch, the impression of her head still visible on the guest room pillow. "Dad?" Jake said as Daniel tucked him in that night. "Is Emily really coming back to stay?" "Yeah, buddy. In 2 months she's moving here." "And then she'll be here all the time?" "Pretty much. Would that be okay with you?" Jake thought about this seriously. "Yeah, I think that would be good. She makes you smile more." Daniel felt his throat tighten. "She makes me smile a lot." "Me too. I love Emily." "I love her too." After Jake fell asleep, Daniel's phone buzzed. "Emily. Made it home safe. Parents are demanding every detail of the week. I told them they'd have to wait because I'm exhausted and going straight to bed. But thank you for everything. These were the best 7 days I've had in months." Daniel typed back, "Thank you for being here, for becoming part of our lives. 2 months and you're home for good. I can't wait." "Sweet dreams, Daniel. Sweet dreams, Emily. Love you too. Always." Daniel set his phone aside and lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. 2 months. 60 days until Emily moved here permanently, until they could stop counting goodbyes and start building something lasting. It felt simultaneously like forever and like no time at all. But they'd already proven they could handle distance, crisis, fear, doubt. They'd chosen each other through all of it. Whatever came next, they'd face it the same way. Together, one day at a time, building toward a future that finally felt possible. And that was more than enough. The 2 months between Emily's spring break visit and her permanent move collapsed into a blur of preparation and anticipation. Daniel found himself doing things he'd never imagined, helping Emily apartment hunt via video chat, discussing school districts and lease terms, planning how to merge 2 separate lives into one shared existence. Jake made countdown chains out of construction paper, ripping off 1 link each morning and announcing how many days remained until Emily came home for good. 17 more days, he'd shout at breakfast, waving the torn paper like a victory flag. "I can count, buddy," Daniel would say, but he felt the same excitement thrumming under his skin. 17 days until everything changed. Until the life he'd been carefully protecting, small, controlled, just him and Jake, opened up to include someone else permanently. The prospect terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. Emily got the teaching job at the high school, starting in the fall. She found a small house to rent 3 blocks from Daniel's place, close enough to be part of their daily lives, but separate enough to give everyone space to adjust. Her lease started July 1st, but she was moving her things in stages, driving down every other weekend with her car packed full of books, clothes, kitchen supplies, all the accumulated pieces of a life being transplanted. "I can't believe I'm actually doing this," she said during one of their nightly phone calls in mid-June. Daniel could hear the nerves threading through her voice. "I gave up my apartment, quit my job, left my parents and sister. What if I'm making a huge mistake?" "Are you having second thoughts?" Daniel kept his voice calm despite the spike of fear in his chest. "No. Maybe. I don't know," Emily sighed. "I want this, Daniel. I want to be there with you and Jake, build a life together, but I'm also scared out of my mind. What if I can't adjust? What if Jake resents me being around all the time? What if we realize we work better with distance than we do living in the same town? Then we figure it out, together." Daniel shifted his phone to his other ear, wishing he could hold her instead of just hearing her voice. "You're allowed to be scared, Emily. This is huge. But you're not doing it alone. We're in this together, remember?" "I know, I just needed to hear you say it." She was quiet for a moment. "My mom cried today when I was packing. Not sad crying," she said. "Happy crying because I'm choosing my own life instead of just taking care of everyone else. But it still made me feel guilty." "Your mom's right, though. You deserve to build your own life. That doesn't mean you're abandoning them." Claire said the same thing. She also said if you hurt me, she'll drive down there and make you regret it. Emily laughed softly. I told her you're more scared than I am, so she should probably save her threats for someone who needs them. I am scared. Terrified, actually, but I'm also ready. Daniel looked at the calendar on his kitchen wall. Emily's move-in date circled in red marker. 10 more days, Em. Then you're home. Home, she echoed. Yeah, I like that. The final week before Emily's move, Daniel threw himself into preparation with an intensity that made Marcus laugh at him. He repainted the guest room in her house. She'd asked him to, wanting it done before her furniture arrived. Installed new shelves in her kitchen, fixed a leaky faucet, made sure everything was perfect for her arrival. You know she's not going to care if the paint job is flawless, right? Marcus said, watching Daniel touch up trim work for the third time. She's moving here to be with you, not to inspect your carpentry skills. I just want everything to be right. She's giving up a lot to be here, and you're giving her a reason to stay. Stop stressing. Marcus handed him a beer, ignoring Daniel's protest about still working. Seriously, man, relax. Emily loves you. Jake loves her. You're building something good here. Trust that. Daniel took the beer, setting down his paintbrush. What if I'm not enough? I'm a mechanic who barely finished community college. She has a master's degree, could have taught anywhere. She chose here, chose me. And what if... Stop. Marcus's voice was firm. You're doing that thing where you decide you're not good enough and try to sabotage yourself before anyone else can hurt you. Emily sees you, Danny, really sees you, and she chose you anyway. That's not something to question. It's something to be grateful for. The words settled something in Daniel's chest. Marcus was right. Emily had seen him at his worst, exhausted, scared, covered in grease, struggling to juggle work and parenting and a relationship. She'd seen all of it and kept choosing him. That had to mean something. When did you get so wise? Daniel asked. I've always been wise. You just never listened before. Marcus clinked his beer against Daniel's. Now finish this room so we can grab dinner. You're buying. Move-in day arrived with perfect July weather. Sunny, but not too hot. A light breeze that made everything feel fresh and full of promise. Emily was driving down with the last of her belongings, a rental truck following with furniture her parents had insisted she take. Claire was coming too, wanting to help her sister settle in, and Daniel suspected to assess him one more time in person. Jake was vibrating with excitement, asking every 5 minutes when Emily would arrive, despite Daniel telling him repeatedly that it would be at least another hour. Can I give her the picture I made, John? Jake asked, holding up a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures labeled Dad, Emily, and Jake, standing in front of a house. She's gonna love it. Daniel straightened the drawing, his throat tightening at the simple family portrait. Want to help me make sure her house is ready? They walked the 3 blocks to Emily's rental, Jake running ahead and then circling back, too energized to walk at a normal pace. The house looked good, small but charming, with a front porch and a yard that needed work, but had potential. Daniel had been there a dozen times in the past week, making sure everything functioned properly, but he checked again anyway. Lights worked, water ran, heat and air conditioning both functional, everything ready for Emily to make it home. His phone buzzed. Emily. 20 minutes out. I can't believe this is really happening, Daniel typed back. Believe it. We're ready for you. Is Jake excited? He's been bouncing off walls since 6 this morning. Pretty sure he's going to tackle you when you get here. I can handle it. See you soon. Love you. Love you too. They waited on Emily's front porch, Jake unable to sit still, Daniel feeling his own anticipation build with each passing minute. When the rental truck finally turned onto the street, Jake let out a whoop and ran toward it before Daniel could stop him. Emily's car pulled up behind the truck, and she was barely out of the driver's seat before Jake launched himself at her. She caught him with a laugh, spinning him around while he chattered excitedly about how long he'd been waiting and how he made her a picture and how her house was ready. Daniel approached more slowly, giving them their moment, but his eyes were locked on Emily. She looked tired from the drive, but radiant, her smile so bright it made his chest ache. Hey, she said when Jake finally released her, stepping into Daniel's arms like she'd been gone months instead of 2 weeks. Hey yourself, welcome home. He kissed her, aware of Jake making exaggerated gagging sounds beside them, but not caring. How was the drive? Long, but worth it. Emily pulled back to look at him. I'm really here. I'm really staying. Yeah, you are. Daniel tucked hair behind her ear. Ready for this? Absolutely terrified and completely ready. She turned as Claire emerged from the truck, looking tired and assessing in equal measure. Claire survived 6 hours in a truck with all my stuff. She deserves a medal. Claire hugged her sister, then turned that evaluating gaze on Daniel. So, you're the reason I just drove 6 hours with a truck full of furniture. Guilty. Daniel extended his hand. Thanks for helping her move. I know it's not easy letting her go. It's not. But she's happy, and that's what matters. Claire shook his hand firmly. Just keep making her happy, and we won't have problems. I plan to. The rest of the day dissolved into controlled chaos. Marcus and Steve showed up to help unload the truck, along with Mrs. Rodriguez and several neighbors who'd heard through the small-town grapevine that the new teacher was moving in. Boxes were carried, furniture arranged and rearranged, debates held about where things should go. Jake appointed himself Emily's assistant, seriously consulting on whether her bookshelf should go against this wall or that wall, whether her couch faced the right direction. By late afternoon, the truck was empty and the house was beginning to look lived in. Boxes still needed unpacking, pictures still needed hanging, but the bones of it were there. Emily stood in her new living room, looking around with something like wonder. This is mine, she said quietly. My house, in the town where you live, where we're building a life together. Daniel came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. How does it feel? Surreal, scary, right. She leaned back against him. Really, really right. Claire left after dinner, hugging Emily for a long time and whispering something Daniel couldn't hear that made Emily nod and wipe her eyes. Then she surprised Daniel by hugging him too. Take care of her, Claire said, or I'll make the 6-hour drive to kick your ass. Understood. Good. She softened slightly. She loves you, you know, more than I've ever seen her love anyone. Don't waste that. I won't. I promise. After Claire left, after Marcus and Steve and the neighbors dispersed, it was just Daniel, Emily, and Jake sitting on Emily's front porch in the fading summer light. Jake was finally quiet, worn out from excitement and activity, leaning against Emily's side while she ran her fingers through his hair absently. I should probably get him home, Daniel said. Bath and bed before he crashes completely. Will you come back? Emily asked. After he's asleep? I know it's late, but I don't want to spend my first night here alone. Of course. Give me an hour. Jake protested the departure but was asleep before they made it home. Daniel carried him inside, got him cleaned up and into pajamas through sheer muscle memory, tucked him in with his favorite dinosaur. Then he stood in the doorway of Jake's room, looking at his sleeping son, thinking about how much their lives had changed in the past year. A year ago, it had been just the two of them. Daniel had been certain that was all he needed, all he could handle. The idea of letting someone else into their carefully constructed world had seemed impossible, terrifying, doomed to fail. But Emily had slipped past every defense he'd built, had proven that love didn't have to mean losing control, that opening his heart didn't guarantee it would be broken. She'd shown up again and again through distance and difficulty and doubt. And now she was here, 3 blocks away, waiting for him. Mrs. Rodriguez was happy to come sit with Jake, waving off Daniel's thanks with the assertion that she had nothing better to do on a Saturday night anyway. Daniel walked to Emily's house through the warm summer evening, cicadas singing, porch lights glowing on houses where families were settling in for the night. Emily's porch light was on, and she was waiting on the steps, 2 glasses of wine in hand. Thought we could celebrate, she said, handing him a glass as he sat beside her. My first night as an official resident. To new beginnings, Daniel said, clinking his glass against hers. To choosing each other. Every day. Emily took a sip, then set her glass down. I need to tell you something. Daniel's stomach dropped. That sounds ominous. Not ominous, just honest. She turned to face him fully. I'm scared, Daniel, really scared. I moved my entire life here for you, for us, and part of me is terrified I made a mistake. Not because I don't love you. I do. So much it sometimes feels like I can't breathe. but because I don't know how to do this, how to be a partner and a parental figure and myself all at once. You think I know how to do this? Daniel set his own glass down, taking her hands. Em, I've been a single parent for 4 years. I have no idea how to share that with someone. How to let someone else in on decisions about Jake. How to balance being his father with being your partner. I'm terrified too. So what do? We figure it out together. Make mistakes, apologize, try again. That's what we've been doing all along, right? Just now we get to do it in the same place instead of 3 hours apart. Emily laughed, the sound watery but genuine. When you put it that way, it almost sounds doable. It is doable. It won't be perfect, but it'll be ours. Daniel pulled her closer. I love you, Emily Carter. I love that you're brave enough to be scared and do this anyway. I love that you moved here, that you chose us, that you're willing to figure out this messy, complicated, beautiful thing with me. I love you too. She kissed him, soft and sure. Let's make this work. They sat on the porch until the wine was gone and the stars were out, talking about everything and nothing. About Emily's first day at the new school, about how they'd navigate Jake's routines, about weekend plans and future possibilities. It was ordinary and extraordinary all at once. The following week settled into a new rhythm that felt both strange and natural. Emily would come over for dinner most nights, sometimes cooking with Daniel, sometimes bringing takeout when they were both too tired. Jake adjusted to her presence with surprising ease, asking her opinions on everything from which dinosaur was fastest to whether his drawing looked more like a T-Rex or an Allosaurus. I think it looks exactly like what you wanted it to look like, Emily would say diplomatically, and Jake would beam like she'd given him the highest praise. Boundaries emerged organically. Emily didn't discipline Jake, that was Daniel's territory, but she could redirect him gently when needed. She attended his preschool graduation in June, sitting beside Daniel and Mrs. Rodriguez, cheering when Jake received his little certificate. She came to the shop sometimes during her lunch break, bringing Daniel food he'd forgotten to pack, content to sit on a stool and watch him work while they talked. You really love this, she observed one afternoon, watching him diagnose an electrical problem that had stumped 2 other mechanics. It's like solving a puzzle. Everything has a reason, a cause, and effect. You just have to find it. Daniel tested another connection, satisfied when the light flickered. There, loose ground wire. See? Mystery solving. I told you. By August, as Emily prepared for her first day at the new school, the strangeness had worn off. Having her in town felt normal, felt right. Jake would run to her house after preschool pickup sometimes, with Daniel's permission, and she'd give him a snack while they waited for Daniel to finish work. They'd have family dinners, all 3 of them cooking together in Daniel's small kitchen, Jake standing on a stool to help stir sauce or tear lettuce. One evening in late August, after Jake was in bed and Emily was helping Daniel clean up from dinner, she paused in the middle of drying a dish. I was thinking, she said carefully, maybe Jake could start calling me Emily instead of Miss Carter. It feels weird having him use my teacher name when we're all eating breakfast together. Daniel looked at her, understanding what she was really asking. Permission to be more integrated into Jake's life, to be something beyond his dad's girlfriend. What do you want him to call you? Just Emily. I'm not trying to replace his mother. You couldn't if you tried. Rachel was never really his mother in any meaningful way. Daniel took the dish from her hands. Emily is perfect. It's who you are to him. She smiled, relief evident. Okay, good. I just wanted to check. I appreciate that, but Em, you don't have to ask permission for everything. You're part of this family, part of our lives. I trust your judgment with Jake. Even when I let him have ice cream before dinner last week? Okay, maybe not that judgment, but mostly I trust you. Daniel pulled her close, and she came willingly, fitting against him like she'd been designed for exactly this spot. Thank you for being patient with all of this, for understanding that I'm figuring it out as I go. We both are. That's the whole point. She looked up at him. I love you. I love Jake. I love this life we're building, even when it's messy and complicated and nothing like I imagined. Better than you imagined? So much better. She kissed him, and Daniel felt that familiar warmth spread through his chest. The certainty that this was right, that Emily being here was exactly what all three of them needed. September brought Emily's first day at the high school, and she was a bundle of nerves despite having taught for years. Daniel made her coffee, packed her lunch, and gave her a pep talk that made her laugh despite her anxiety. "You're going to be amazing," he said, kissing her at the door. "Those kids are lucky to have you." "Call me if you need anything," she said, then caught herself. "Sorry, force of habit from when I was 3 hours away." "I know where to find you, 3 blocks that way," Daniel pointed. "Now go teach some teenagers about Shakespeare." She texted him throughout the day with updates, small victories, and funny moments. By the time she showed up at his house that evening, exhausted but smiling, Daniel knew she'd found her place here. Jake insisted on hearing every detail about her first day, asking questions with genuine interest while they ate dinner. And watching them interact, Emily patient with his endless curiosity, Jake soaking up her attention, Daniel felt something shift. This wasn't just him and Jake anymore. With Emily as an addition, this was a family. Imperfect, still finding its footing, but real. That night, after Emily had gone home and Jake was asleep, Daniel sat in his living room with his phone, looking at a small velvet box he'd been carrying in his truck for 2 weeks. The ring inside was simple, white gold with a single diamond, nothing flashy but quality. He'd bought it on impulse after seeing Emily with Jake at the park, both of them laughing at something, both of them looking at him with identical expressions of affection. He wasn't going to propose tonight, probably not for a few more months, wanted to make sure they were solid, that the transition of living in the same town had really worked, but having the ring felt right, like a promise to himself that this was the direction they were heading, that someday soon he'd ask Emily to make this permanent, to officially become part of their family. His phone buzzed. "Emily, thank you for today, for the coffee and pep talk and just believing in me. I love you." Daniel smiled, typing back, "Love you too. Proud of you. Sleep well." He put the ring back in its hiding place and headed to bed, thinking about the future. About Emily moving from 3 blocks away to just down the hall. About Jake having a mother who chose to be there, who loved him not out of obligation but genuine affection. About building something lasting with someone who saw him completely and loved him anyway. The fall passed in a blur of routine and small moments. Emily settled into teaching, forming connections with students who reminded her why she'd chosen this profession. Jake started kindergarten, coming home with stories about new friends and daily dramas that seemed incredibly important. Daniel's business stayed steady, enough work to keep him busy without overwhelming him, and through it all, the three of them built a life together. Sunday morning pancakes became tradition. Wednesday afternoons at the park, Emily grading papers while Jake played. Friday movie nights where Jake would fall asleep halfway through and they'd carry him to bed before finishing the film themselves. By November, Daniel couldn't remember what life had been like before Emily. She'd woven herself so completely into their daily existence that her absence would leave gaping holes. Jake talked about her constantly at school, to the point where his teacher mentioned during parent conferences that he seemed very attached to Miss Emily. She's important to him," Daniel said. "To both of us." "I can tell. It's wonderful seeing him so happy. He's really flourished this year." Walking out of the school that evening, Emily's hand in his, Daniel made a decision. He'd been waiting for the perfect moment, but maybe there wasn't such a thing. Maybe the perfect moment was just now, just this, the ordinary evening of an ordinary week in the extraordinary life they'd built. "Want to take a walk before we pick up Jake?" he asked. Mrs. Rodriguez was watching him for the evening, giving Daniel and Emily a rare night to themselves. "Sure. Where to?" "The lake, where we had our first date." They drove to the Lakeside Cafe, which had reopened after renovations and looked exactly the same despite fresh paint and new furniture. The evening was cool, early winter settling in, but not cold enough to be uncomfortable. They walked along the shore, hands linked, not talking much because they didn't need to. Daniel led her to the spot where they'd stood after that first coffee date, where he'd watched her drive away and felt the first stirrings of hope that maybe his life could be more than just survival. "I've been thinking," he said, stopping to face her, "about that first night. How terrified I was to walk through that door. How sure I was that this would be a disaster, that letting someone in would only end badly. But you came anyway. Emily squeezed his hand. Even though you were scared. Because Marcus and Steve wouldn't shut up about it, but also because some part of me wanted to hope, wanted to believe I could have more than just work and parenting. Daniel took a breath, feeling the ring box in his jacket pocket. You changed everything, Emily. You showed me that love doesn't have to mean losing control, that opening my heart doesn't guarantee it'll get broken, that being scared is okay as long as you're brave enough to try anyway. Emily's eyes were starting to shine with unshed tears. Daniel, let me finish. He pulled out the ring box, watching her expression shift from confusion to understanding to overwhelming emotion. I had this whole speech planned, something poetic about second chances and building futures. But the truth is simpler than that. I love you. Jake loves you. We want you in our lives, permanently, officially. Not just as my girlfriend or Jake's Emily, but as family. He opened the box, the diamond catching the last light of the sunset. Emily Carter, will you marry me? Will you take on a mechanic who works too much and a 5-year-old who asks too many questions and a life that's never going to be simple or easy but will always be real? Emily was crying now, full tears streaming down her face, but she was also smiling so brightly it rivaled the sunset. Yes, yes, of course, yes. Daniel slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted like tears and laughter and promise. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Emily held up her hand to look at the ring in the fading light. It's perfect, she said. You're perfect. This is perfect. We're a lot of things, but perfect isn't one of them. Perfect for each other, then. How's that? That I can agree with. Daniel kissed her again, softer this time. Ready to go tell Jake he's getting a stepmom? Is he going to be okay with this? We never really talked about... He's been asking when you're going to move in with us for 3 months. I think he'll be thrilled. Daniel took her hand, the one with the ring, and started walking back toward the car. Come on, let's go tell our son the good news. Jake was, predictably, over the moon. When they told him that Emily was going to marry Daniel and officially become part of their family, he whooped and ran around the living room before tackling Emily in a hug that nearly knocked her over. Does this mean you'll live here? He asked, bouncing with excitement. Emily looked at Daniel, question in her eyes. They hadn't discussed logistics, had been taking things slow with her maintaining her own place. But Daniel found himself nodding. If she wants to, if you want to, he added, looking at Emily. I want to, she said, more than anything. Then yeah, buddy, Emily's going to move in with us. Be a family for real. Jake's celebration continued for another 20 minutes before exhaustion caught up with him and he crashed hard, falling asleep on the couch between Daniel and Emily. They sat there, not wanting to move him, Emily's head on Daniel's shoulder, both of them staring at the ring on her finger. When? Emily asked quietly. Should we do a long engagement or whenever you want? Tomorrow? Next year? Doesn't matter to me. I just want to start our life together. Daniel paused. But maybe after the school year? Give you time to settle into the job, us time to figure out living together, Jake, time to adjust? That sounds perfect. Summer wedding? Emily smiled. Nothing fancy, just family and close friends. Maybe outside if the weather cooperates. Whatever makes you happy. They talked for another hour, making loose plans, imagining possibilities. Finally, they carried Jake to his bed, both of them tucking him in together, and Emily stayed over for the first time. Not in the guest room, but in Daniel's room, in his bed, holding each other in the darkness. I can't believe this is real, Emily whispered. A year ago, I was 3 hours away taking care of my dad. Sure, I'd never figure out how to balance everything. And now I'm here, engaged, about to become a stepmother. Stepmother, Daniel repeated. That's going to take some getting used to. Good getting used to? The best. He kissed her forehead. Thank you for not giving up, for choosing us even when it was hard. Thank you for letting me, for trusting me with Jake, with your heart. Emily was quiet for a moment. I know I'm not his biological mother. I know I can't replace the mother he should have had, but I promise I'll love him like he's mine. I already do. I know. He knows too. Daniel tightened his arms around her. You're exactly what we both needed, what we didn't even know we were looking for. The months between the engagement and the wedding passed quickly. Emily moved into Daniel's house officially in January. Her rental returned to the landlord with thanks. They merged their lives in the small space. Emily's books on Daniel's shelves, her coffee maker on his counter, her presence in every room making the house feel more like a home than it ever had. Jake adjusted beautifully, thrilled to have Emily around all the time. They established new routines together, Emily helping with homework while Daniel made dinner, all three of them cleaning up together afterward. Weekend mornings where they'd make elaborate breakfasts and eat too much. There were adjustments, certainly. Arguments about parenting styles, about whose turn it was to handle discipline, about balancing work and family and personal time. But they talked through each conflict, learning how to communicate, how to compromise, how to be partners in every sense of the word. The wedding was scheduled for late June, after Emily's first school year ended. They kept it simple, just as they'd planned. A ceremony in the park where they'd spent so many afternoons, a reception at the VFW hall that Steve helped them book. Emily's parents and Claire made the trip down, Roger looking healthier than he had in over a year. Marcus stood as Daniel's best man, making a speech that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. But the best moment, the one Daniel would remember forever, was watching Jake walk Emily down the aisle. They'd asked him together if he wanted to, and his eyes had gone wide with importance and pride. "I get to give her to you?" he'd asked. "We're all giving ourselves to each other," Emily had explained, "becoming a family together." So Jake walked beside Emily in his little suit, serious and careful, and when they reached Daniel at the makeshift altar, Jake took Emily's hand and placed it in Daniel's with solemn ceremony. "Take care of her, Dad," he whispered loudly enough for half the guests to hear. "I will, buddy. We'll take care of each other." The ceremony was short, personal, filled with promises they'd already been keeping for months. When the officiant pronounced them married and Daniel kissed Emily while their friends and family cheered, Jake squeezed between them for a family hug that made everyone laugh. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted, casual, joyful, full of people who'd supported them through the past year and a half. They danced under string lights as the summer evening cooled, Jake alternating between tearing around with the other kids and demanding dances with both Daniel and Emily. "I can't believe we pulled this off," Emily said during a rare quiet moment, leaning against Daniel's chest while they swayed to some slow song he didn't recognize. "We're good at pulling things off. Long-distance relationship during a family crisis? Moving across the state? Merging two lives? We can handle a wedding." Daniel kissed the top of her head. "Besides, the hard part's over. Now we just get to be married." "Just?" Emily laughed. "Because marriage is so simple. With you? Yeah, actually, it is." They danced until Jake fell asleep on a pile of jackets in the corner, until the night grew late and the guests started to leave. Then they carried their son to the truck. Their son, Daniel thought, Emily's legally now as much as his through the adoption papers they'd filed, and drove home through the summer darkness. Home to the house they shared, the life they'd built, the future they'd chosen together, despite every obstacle and fear. Later, after they'd settled Jake into bed and were finally alone in their room, Emily took Daniel's hands and just looked at him for a long moment. "What?" he asked. "I'm just thinking about that first date. How you almost didn't show up. How sure you were that it would be a disaster." She smiled. "Look at us now." "Look at us now," Daniel echoed. "Married, parents, building a life together." Was it worth it? All the hard parts, the distance, the fear? Daniel pulled her close, feeling the absolute rightness of her in his arms, in his life, in their home. "Every single second. I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." "Me too." Emily rose on her toes to kiss him. "I love you, Daniel Brooks." "I love you too, Emily Brooks." He savored her new name, the way it sounded, what it meant. "Welcome home. For good this time." "For good," she agreed. "Forever." And standing there in their bedroom, in the house they shared, with their son sleeping down the hall and their whole future stretching ahead, Daniel knew that the blind date he'd almost skipped had become the best decision of his life. Not because it had been easy, but because it had been worth it. Because love, real love, wasn't about perfect circumstances or guaranteed outcomes. It was about choosing someone every day, through distance and difficulty and fear. It was about showing up, trying, building something together piece by piece until it became solid enough to last. It was this, them, together. And that was more than enough. It was everything.